Hour 1. There is only one news story on every website, newspaper, and TV screen. The flowers are blooming everywhere, all across the globe. Every country, every landmass. The bitter cold of the Antarctic gives way to a glowing rainbow of petals. The Sahara Desert and Death Valley become beacons of thriving technicolor plant life. The highest mountains, the lowest valleys, the darkest caves. The flowers even burst free from the concrete of cities, as if reminding us that really it was never our world. We were only borrowing it. And today, our lease is up. This is SCP-001, Object Class, Unnecessary. It was foretold by tales from other dimensions, a distant future coming down the tracks towards us. And today, the train has reached the station. Nobody's reporting on how the economy or the stock market is doing today. No point. Celebrity scandals have faded away into nothingness. Greedy businessmen, lying politicians, brutal tyrants. None of them are making the headlines today. The very last headlines. The world gone beautiful. And what a shame. It takes the end of it all to make us realize what really matters to us. That's right. You're looking at the end of the world. But it's okay. Don't panic. Take a deep breath in and out. It was bound to happen eventually, so no point worrying now. Even the Foundation knows that this just isn't something they can stop. So instead of asking things like how can we prevent this or do we have any final tricks up our sleeve, let's ask a different question entirely. What would you do if you knew that you only had 24 hours until all life on Earth ends? Think hard. After all, even if you never live to see the flowers bloom, a final day will still come for you, just as it does for us all. Hour 6. A D-Class sits alone in his cell when he sees the flowers growing out of the ground. Normally he'd assume that this meant he was in some kind of Foundation experiment, but not today. Everyone on Earth had an innate sense that the time is now. A kind of gallows calm spreads out over everyone and everything. It's over, and that's okay. We all knew it was going to happen eventually, right? He sighs and gives a slight smile. Those flowers sure are beautiful. That's when he hears footsteps outside his cell approaching. A key slides into his cell door and opens. There stands Dr. Gears, holding a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Anyone who knows him might think he's been replaced by some kind of shape-shifting anomaly, or had his mind taken over by a powerful cognito hazard. But no, it's him, the famously cold Dr. Charles Ogden Gears. Dr. Gears says, "Come on, it's a lovely day out there. It'd be a terrible waste to spend the whole thing cooped up in here. It'd feel like a trick on any day but this." The D-Class nods and follows the doctor out. The normally oh-so-stoic Foundation senior researcher pours himself and the D-Class each a glass of wine and asks, "What's your name, by the way? I don't think I ever checked." The D-Class replies that his name is Harold. The two smile and chat as they exit the now empty D-Class containment wing. Everyone else is outside already. Researchers, guards, administrative staff, and D-Classes, all rubbing elbows, enjoying the beautiful sun on their last day together. Elsewhere on site, a flock of SCP-514 is released, just as identical flocks are being released from every containment site all over the world. They've prepared it all for this very day. SCP-514 is a special breed of homing pigeons created by the Mana Charitable Foundation, which have the power to suppress aggression for those within their field of anomalous influence. And now millions of them are flying all over the world. After all, there's no point fighting on a day like this. There is no future left to secure. People always told them there would forever be hope until the flowers bloomed. No situation was ever truly over until the world went beautiful. But in the absence of hope, there was something even more inviting. Total, absolute calm. The Site-19 personnel sit together and watch the flowers bloom. Hour 12. All militaries call a global ceasefire. Soldiers from opposing sides hug and shake hands in flowery fields that once seemed choked by death and blood. Borders fade. Bitter rivalries turn to dust. Korea unifies. All is quiet in the Middle East. Gangsters and drug cartels drop their weapons and return home to their families and friends as flocks of SCP-514 fly above. What good is all the blood money in the world on a day like this? Wardens walk cell to cell through all the world's prisons, granting people their freedom again, sometimes after lifetimes of not having it. They taste the air again, feel the sun on their face. They close their eyes, drink it in, and walk among the flowers. Free men. Locations of Marshall, Carter, and Dark Limited close their doors and shutter their windows worldwide. For the first time in as long as any of them can remember, they turn their signs to closed. They've earned a day off. Everyone has. The Chaos Insurgency rolls up their plans and burns them. They drop their weapons and throw away their tactical gear. As they do so, they can't help but question themselves. What was it all for in the end? What was any of it for? All the fighting and bloodshed and death. We did it day after day, only to do it again the next day. What silly reasons we killed and died for. What silly reasons indeed. The Global Occult Coalition dismisses its staff, thanking them for their service and telling them to go spend their last hours with the ones they love. Like the Foundation, they accept that this is the one true final end. No ritual to stop, no monster to fight. No evil extra-dimensional entity to thwart. Just go outside and smell the flowers, while you still can. The Serpent's Hand are similar. They decide after decades fighting a losing battle, they'll spend their last day in the Wanderer's Library, reading some of their favorite volumes. All these wonderful stories, now left for other Earths to read. Their own stories would be counted among them in the end, and they take great comfort in that. In a sense, everyone will live forever in the pages of the books in the Wanderer's Library. Herman Fuller's Circus of the Disquieting releases all of its freaks and clowns from their twisted grasp to go and live out whatever small dreams and tiny pleasures they could find over their last hours. They have no foundation of fear anymore. Nobody minds their strange appearances and odd behaviors. Why would anyone waste such a beautiful day judging others? On the last day on Earth, there's nothing left to prove. Sarkissists drop their ancient flesh-bound tomes, and acolytes of the broken god put down their gilded blades. On the slopes of Siberia, the jungles of Peru, and the most isolated beaches of Mexico, twisted flesh finally touch living metal in the spirit of husbandry. Their eternal war is at its end. In the face of the blooming world, they didn't seem so different after all. The agents of the Dr. Wondertainment Corporation predictably chose to spend their last hours sitting around and playing with toys together. Time well spent, if you ask us. In a highly secretive location, perhaps the most heavily secured place in the entire world, the 13 members of the legendary O5 Council decide to just sit and talk. Anyone who knows anything about this secretive cabal can tell you, the O5 Council has spent a considerable portion of their very, very long lives trying to figure out ways to dodge and cheat death. But now, facing a death they can't dodge, the same calm washing over the rest of the world has finally reached them too. All they can really think this time is, well played, Reaper, well played. As they chat about the kind of inane, casual things that they haven't had time to discuss in years. O5-3 suggests inviting the Ethics Committee over to join. Nobody disagrees. Hour 16. It isn't just the D-classes. All sapient and non-aggressive SCPs have been released from containment, free to spend the last of their time as they wish. Tens of thousands of anomalous individuals are released from containment sites all over the globe. It'd be the greatest victory that the Serpent's Hand could ever ask for, if they weren't all too busy reading to notice. SCP-105 Iris Thompson finally returns to her parents. The Foundation had fed them the lie that their daughter had died many years before, but as Iris had a tendency to do, she was ready to work a miracle. Her parents embrace her with open arms. They'll spend their last hours together catching up on what's happened since they parted ways, and making up for lost time. They couldn't be happier. SCP-1867 Lord Blackwood, the fantastical sea snail, is delivered into a warm rock pool near the site where he was being contained. There he might finally have one more grand adventure before all is said and done. Though afterward, he may not have the time to tell anyone about it. A terrible shame really, because nobody spins a yarn like Lord Blackwood. The non-aggressive little misters run free. Mr. Fish eagerly returns to his native Boston, Massachusetts, where he enjoys one more lobster sandwich before the end of the world. Mr. Headless decides to go hat shopping because he wants to look good for the apocalypse. Mr. Lost finally settles down for the afternoon, deciding that, just this once, he's earned himself a rest. SCP-2800 Cactus Man returns to Edinburgh to spend his last days picking up litter and helping old ladies cross the street. SCP-3663 the Tunnel Monster walks the streets of his hometown, searching for an old friend, hoping to reunite before it all ends. SCP-073 Kane decides to take a walk outside for the first time in thousands of years. He can't help but smile, as the bright, colorful life beneath his feet is growing faster than his presence can kill it. What a truly beautiful day. Knowing that there's no longer time for cults to form and bother him, SCP-2662 Cthulhu decides to take a break from his intense Minecraft session and go take a walk outside. It feels so good to have the sun on his tentacles once more and to feel the lush green grass under his suction cups. He shakes his head, thinking once again about the irritating cults that had been pestering him for decades. What kind of idiot would want him to destroy a world like this? SCP-343, also known as God, sighs and looks over all his creation for what he knows to be the last time. His mouth curls into a smile as he thinks, well, we had a pretty good run. Still in his cell, SCP-049, the Plague Doctor, puts his feet up and decides to relax. The pestilence will soon be taken care of. On some animalistic level, below thought, below even instinct, SCP-096 feels grateful that no gaze will ever fall upon it again. Somewhere fizzling in a vat of acid within a highly secure containment chamber, SCP-682 is feeling, for the first time in its hellish existence, a sense of profound relief. The pain, the hate, the rage, the constant termination attempts, it'd all be over soon. Hour 23. People gather in the streets. They laugh and dance and sing as the moon shines, fat and white, far above. Deep in their hearts, they quietly contemplate the end of all of this. But why worry? Why spoil the fun? There's no future left to worry about. Strangers become as close as family in the end. Human or otherwise, anomalous or non-anomalous, Chaos Insurgency agents have last suppers with ex-Serpent's hands and GOC operatives. There is no hate left, no violence, no malice, no cruelty. The greatest tragedy in all of this is that it took the ultimate end to bring it out in people. But why worry? Why worry? Seconds pass, then minutes. The world buzzes. It hums. Trillions of creatures doing everything they'd wanted, even though it won't last. In the face of the true end, the world has never been more alive. Hour 24. Silence. Forever and ever and ever. Good night. We'll end this video the way it began, by putting a question to you. How would you spend your last 24 hours on Earth? Let us know down in the comments, because it'll happen to all of us, eventually. If you're familiar with the SCP Foundation, then you already know the exact reason why there are multiple SCP-001s. You may even think you know which of them is the real SCP-001. But for those of you who are new here, or who just need a little reminder, the designation of SCP-001 doesn't refer to a single creature, object, or entity, but rather a collection of various anomalies that are apparently kept in containment by the SCP Foundation. At present, it is unclear why there are multiple files collected under the shared designation of SCP-001. Some believe it is because these anomalies are some of the earliest ever contained by the Foundation. This would mean that they share the designation of SCP-001, as they were likely encountered before the SCP Foundation introduced their current numbering system. However, there also exists a theory that this is nothing more than intentional misdirection. Perhaps the multiple SCP-001 files are an attempt by the Foundation to conceal information about the true SCP-001. After all, it wouldn't be the first time this hyper-secretive organization deceived us. Anomalies sharing the name SCP-001 include the infamous Scarlet King, the massive gate guardian, and the world-ending event known as When Day Breaks. But today we'll be using SCP-001 to refer not to an entity or an event, but to a location codenamed God's Blind Spot. Located in an unassuming corner of the world is a site that the SCP Foundation constructed and designated as Facility T. According to their archive, it's a largely unremarkable place, situated at a spot on the Sinai Peninsula, which is a part of Egypt that forms a bridge between the continents of Africa and Asia. In the 18th century, archaeologists excavating the area uncovered the remains of a stone structure believed to be an inn that dates back to the 2nd millennium BC. However, since the construction of Facility T, any trace of this structure has since disappeared. So, what makes this unremarkable site so important to the SCP Foundation? Why establish a facility if there was nothing anomalous about its nature? What distinguishes this SCP-001 site in the eyes of the Foundation is the area's profound lack of any ambient Akiva radiation. But what is Akiva radiation? Well, according to the Foundation's researchers, it's a form of cosmic background radiation, one that's not overtly harmful to human beings. If you grew up in a strict church-going household, then it's highly likely you would have been exposed to a lot of this non-electromagnetic radiation and never even realized it. You see, the thing with Akiva radiation is that it is directly correlated with the amount of religious faith a person has. Regardless of which religion someone follows, Akiva radiation will form around them. It tends to be harmless to humans. However, certain anomalous entities and SCPs considered to be demonic in nature can be repelled and even fought off with high levels of Akiva radiation. The presence of other powerful anomalies, those considered more benign or even holy, can also create an increase in this radiation. SCP-001 has earned the nickname God's Blind Spot for a number of reasons. One being that it is the only place on Earth with a natural absence of this Akiva radiation. The Foundation has conducted experiments that involve bringing sources known to emit Akiva radiation into the area of SCP-001, but when they measured, no change in radiation levels was detected, meaning that the space around Facility T does not actively block Akiva radiation from entering it, but also cannot absorb or retain this religious radiation. It might be more accurate to say that the location destroys any trace of residual Akiva without damaging the source. A lack of faith-fueled radiation is far from the only anomalous property of SCP-001 though. During a number of tests involving D-Class personnel, the Foundation witnessed that, while in the area, it also becomes impossible for the death of any human being to occur, a discovery that obviously needed to be researched further. The first test involved a healthy human male who was left in a containment cell on the SCP-001 site and observed. He had no supplies, no food, no water, yet over 120 days this man stayed alive, never succumbing to starvation or dehydration. Next, a female member of D-Class was exposed to a lethal dose of cyanide gas within Facility T, and suffered none of the expected effects. Foundation researchers then repeated this cyanide gas test using 30 common brown rats, all of which were killed, proving that it was only humans that couldn't be killed while within SCP-001. God's Blind Spot seems to also be able to slow or halt the effects of terminal illnesses, as proven when a D-Class with stage 4 cancer was brought into SCP-001. Despite her prognosis stating that she would be dead imminently, the woman survived in the area for almost 800 days. Her cancer symptoms never advanced, and she only died after finally leaving the area of SCP-001. There are limitations to this anomalous effect though. One test involved cremating a healthy male D-Class while he was still alive. The man's body caught fire just as you would expect it to, and he was burned to death. According to the findings of that test and similar variations, Foundation researchers have learned that the life-preserving qualities of SCP-001 don't prevent death by extreme external damage. One of the final tests to take place within SCP-001 involved a pair of 24-year-old identical D-class twins. One of the twins, designated Twin A, was held at Facility T, while the other, Twin B, was imprisoned in a cell at a different Foundation site. After observing them for over 26 years, Twin B aged naturally to the age of 50. His twin, however, did not appear to age at all over the course of 2.5 decades. It was only when moved to another facility that Twin A began to show signs of aging. The aging process for Twin A was rapid too, and eventually he caught up with his brother. Being a benign, non-threatening anomaly, the Foundation has been more than happy to use God's blind spot to their own advantage. Facility T was specifically established on this site to house the headquarters of the O5 Council, the overseers of the entire SCP Foundation. It's hardly surprising that the Overseer Council would want to set up shop here. After all, it's the one spot on planet Earth where no human being can ever die of natural causes, and will not age for the duration of their stay. Of course, this locked the O5 Council to one location. But what if they could replicate the effects of SCP-001 elsewhere? Of course, this is what the SCP Foundation attempted. Following their research into God's blind spot, the Foundation's own Dr. Marvin Scranton attempted to artificially recreate the area's anomalous effects somewhere else. His hope was, by generating a vacuum of Akiva radiation, that a second instance of SCP-001 would occur at a location of his choosing. Or, as his assistant Bertrand put it, they planned to build a box and then push God out of it. As it turned out, God had other plans. Dr. Scranton quickly realized the hubris of his scheme. The Akiva radiation in the selected area rapidly dropped to 0, just as planned. But then something unexpected happened. Scranton detected an increase in Humes. These are essentially parts of the fabric of reality and are what's often disrupted by reality-bending SCPs. Something had come into our world thanks to the O5 Council's attempt to recreate SCP-001. Something impossible for the Foundation to measure or observe. In other words, Scranton had no idea what he unleashed or where it went. Following this incident, the O5 Council realized a worrying increase in the anomalous incidents they were encountering. Whether or not this came as a direct result of their meddling with the fabric of the universe was unclear, but it forced the Council to reconsider the focus and direction of the entire SCP Foundation. Up until this point, they had been an organization focused purely on research, but now they had to embrace a new approach to how they handled anomalies. From then on, the Foundation's objective became to actively seek out and contain anomalous entities, creatures, objects, and locations like SCP-001. Rather than just observing these phenomena for study, they would secure, contain, and protect. The final portion of SCP-001's file is a memorandum detailing an arrangement between the O5 Council and an unknown counterparty. In the document, someone named Sheldon Katz set out revised terms for the Foundation's continued use of Facility T. Sheldon states that he has reached an understanding with the counterparty, and that the contents of the document are to serve as a formal agreement, a contract of sorts between the SCP Foundation and someone else. According to this contract, the incident with Scranton put a strain on the relationship between the Foundation and whoever the counterparty is, and that the O5 Council are seeking to make amends in order to continue their new goal of collecting and containing anomalies. So who was this counterparty that the Overseer Council was so desperate to appease and have on their side? Who could possibly be a higher power than the most powerful secret organization on Earth? Well, an actual higher power, of course. That's right, the O5 Council was making a deal with God over how they were allowed to use his blind spot, or at least a very powerful being that considers itself to be God. The rules laid out on their agreement stated that no person was permitted to stay at the site of SCP-001 for more than 120 years, including members of the O5 Council, along with other members of Foundation staff, management, researchers, security personnel, and test subjects. Additionally, the SCP Foundation's Ethics Committee was required to annually report any and all of the O5 Council's decisions to God. For his own part, God was restricted from smiting or exacting his terrible wrath upon any member of Foundation personnel. That's right. A perk of working for the SCP Foundation is getting around-the-clock divine protection, at least from God himself. That's still a lot better than an employee dental plan. This came with a condition, however, that anyone committing a transgression or mortal sin was given a 90-day written notice and an opportunity to repent their wrongdoing. In return, God demanded that members of the Foundation only worshipped him and no other divine entities. I, the Lord, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, was written in the contract. Finally, the agreement between the O5 Council and God was that they would work together. The Foundation and the Counterparty would be equal partners when it came to the containment of SCPs and anomalies. Of all the strange and unexplained phenomena that the SCP Foundation encounters on a regular basis, it hardly comes as much of a surprise that they've got a direct line to the big guy upstairs, or at least one who purports to be. Still, the fact that the O5 Council have a business arrangement with an ultra-powerful deity-like being and express written permission to use his blind spot where no person can die or age is hardly a comforting thought. At least the SCP Foundation only ever uses its power for good, right? The SCP Foundation has faced a number of wide, potentially apocalyptic threats in its mission to uphold normalcy and save humanity. We know the SCP Foundation could be ruthless in this mission. The events of SCP-5000 before Agent Pietro restarted the universe show what happens when the Foundation is pushed to its final decisions regarding normalcy being upheld. In SCP-5000, it seemed that the SCP Foundation decided to cease research further into the anomaly they needed to neutralize. But what would have happened if they didn't? In any case, we know the SCP Foundation is dedicated to normalcy and the containment of the anomalous. But what happens when the SCP Foundation is faced with a dire decision: uphold normalcy or destroy their universe? The multiverse is a concept in science fiction that has gained mass amounts of popularity over recent years, especially recently thanks to a certain wall crawlers movie. Multiverses are parallel universes that are similar or extremely different from the main ones. Scientists have pondered over the existence of a multiverse for hundreds of years, with the most popular being the many worlds interpretation, a theory of quantum mechanics that states there are many worlds that exist in parallel at the same space and time as our own. Some interpretations even state that every decision a person makes causes a branch in reality where the person made the other decision. We're familiar with the SCP Foundation's run-ins with the multiverse, from SCP-2935-0 Death, a cave that allows the Wanderer to enter a parallel dimension that's fully and completely dead, only for the same thing to happen to their own world once they return through the cave, or SCP-1437, a hole that allows the Foundation to send, receive, and read parallel dimensional documentation from other multiversal SCP Foundations. Combine those two concepts with an SCP-001 proposal. The importance of an SCP-001 proposal is not lost on the Foundation. Researchers of the SCP Foundation saved the SCP-001 slot for only the most dangerous, apocalyptic, or widespread anomalies that could affect the Foundation itself, humanity, and normalcy. PALLIT.AIC's SCP-001 proposal and the research within its file found the answer to the question we posed above. When the SCP Foundation is faced with a dire decision, do they uphold normalcy or destroy their universe and all the people who live in it? The file begins somewhat different from what we're used to with SCP Foundation files. Instead of an item number or containment procedures, We begin with a yellow notice from the Records and Information Security Administration, or RAISA for short. The notice states that the following file was received in 2026 from Dimension R42. Is Dimension R42 potentially the cause of SCP-001? Could they be attacking this version of the SCP Foundation? The notice continues with the description of the file that follows it. It states the file below describes an anomaly threatening all members of humankind in all of the multiverse. This file had been emitted to this version of the SCP Foundation for 8 minutes as an extremely dangerous cognitohazard, classified as a Class 5 cognitohazard capable of easily destabilizing and penetrating this universe. However, it was found to not be dangerous, only reading as a danger level 0. While this Foundation was unable to quickly counteract this cognitohazard, it appeared to not pose a threat to the affected universe's humankind. Part of this notice is crossed out, indicating that it is no longer true. There is a high threat of repeated cognitohazardous or other forms of attack from Dimension R42. Instead, this part has been replaced with the following fact. Dimension R42 no longer exists. Did this version's SCP Foundation fall to SCP-001? Their entire universe no longer exists, so perhaps this file that this dimension's SCP Foundation received could be a potential warning. Under this RAISA notice, the reader is not greeted with the standard Foundation documentation yet again. Instead, it seems that the original senders of this file left a note for the readers of this file. It says, "Greetings. You are reading this dossier in a paradimension of the relict dimension R42. Due to the colossal size of your world's address, for your convenience, your dimension will be hereafter referred to as PD. Paradimensions." It seems as though we're reading this SCP-001 file through the eyes of the SCP Foundation in this so-called paradimension. So, if the original SCP Foundation and their universe, R42, is now destroyed, what does this mean for us? The note continues. The following message has been constructed by the SCP Foundation of the Relic Dimension R42 and is addressed to the SCP Foundation of Paradimension PD. Enclosed, you will find information about SCP-001, which is a threat to the multiverse. Here we go. SCP-001 is definitely the cause of R42's destruction. But how can we be so sure of this? Maybe SCP-001 caused the Foundation to destroy their universe. The note also includes the following statement. As you may have noticed, this message was preceded by a burst signal containing a non-dangerous cognitohazard. The burst signal was constructed in such a way that minimal change to the signal would have caused indiscriminate and overwhelming casualties among the denizens of PD. As you can see, R42 is capable of eliminating the absolute majority of PD denizens, but has not exercised this capability. In the context above, we ask you to consider this action not as an act of aggression, but as a demonstration of the fact that R42 has no pretension for conquest or other forms of aggression towards PD. Take the following information in earnest. Well, at least this version of the SCP Foundation is being somewhat friendly with the paradimension. If R42's SCP Foundation needs to quell this multiversal threat though, why are they leaving it up to an SCP Foundation that may not be so inclined? The SCP-001 file begins with the object class. This anomaly is of the joint class of Paradox Apollyon. We know from SCP-001 When Day Breaks, or SCP-3999, that Apollyon-class anomalies are extremely dangerous, posing an immediate and almost unstoppable threat to normalcy, the SCP Foundation, all of humanity, or even the universe itself. The paradox part is interesting. What exactly is paradoxical about an Apollyon-class anomaly? A footnote explains this for us. This anomaly's distinguishing feature is that, in order to eliminate the anomaly that will inevitably eliminate mankind, it is imperative to eliminate mankind, or release another K-class event. Oh boy. It seems that the SCP Foundation of R42 was not eliminated by SCP-001. They eliminated themselves to contain SCP-001. Is this paradimension faced with this decision now? The containment procedures of the SCP file continue on this note. The only way to contain SCP-001 and prevent a ZK-class cross-reality failure event is the annihilation of humankind. K-class scenarios are not a concept used lightly by the SCP Foundation. We're familiar with the Omega K-class scenario when we are completely rid of death, or XK-class end-of-the-world scenarios, so we know the danger these anomalies hold to humankind, normalcy, and the world. The SCP Foundation will do anything to prevent these scenarios from occurring, apparently even including the elimination of all humankind or entire universes. The description goes more in depth on the SCP-001 anomaly. SCP-001 consists of all living members of the Homo sapiens species living within Dimension R42 and the Paradimension, or PD for short. It seems as though this anomaly was created out of a mistake from Dimension R42 and PD. As the description states, the anomaly first came into existence and developed in the relic Dimension R42 and later activated in PD by accident. How could this have happened? Are these dimensions linked much more closely than we first thought? Let's continue with the description to find more information. Scarily, this portion of the description contains a note that states that unchecked growth of SCP-001 will cause the annihilation of the entire multiverse. The SCP Foundations of Dimension R42 and PD are not met with this decision, as now the entire multiverse is at risk. The R42 SCP Foundation has done immense research on the topic of the multiverse of their universe. After the Big Bang, a finite number of universes were created, only 57 to be exact. However, only one dimension was able to form humanity, Dimension R42, and it's unknown why this happened. But all we know is that with the destruction of R42 and the potential annihilation of PD, humanity will cease to exist in the multiverse. The danger of SCP-001 is that it has the anomalous capability for wide-scale replication of paradimensions. We are reading this article from one of these paradimensions, so this SCP Foundation is technically an anomaly that must contain itself. A paradimension is defined as a parallel reality that has an extremely small deviation from its parent dimension. In this case, PD is a paradimension of R42. It seems that these paradimensions form as a result of human decision-making. So if you've ever been between a type of shirt to buy or were confused on an exam and guessed a question, a paradimension could have formed from this decision, where the paradimension has you take the other choice. Because of this, dimensions housing living instances of SCP-001 uncontrollably grow a colossal number of minimally differing paradimensions every second. No sign of paradimensions have been found in the other 56 parent dimensions. The picture on this file shows how PD has branched from R42, but at this point, it seems that millions, if not billions or trillions of paradimensions now exist. The real problem of paradimensions is that the multiverse has a limit on the number of paradimensions that can exist, and once that is crossed, the ZK-class cross-reality failure event will begin, and the multiverse will be destroyed. The R42 Dimensions SCP Foundation has also discovered that once humankind emerges in the paradimension, they can begin to have paradimensions themselves. The ZK-class cross-reality failure event can be expected to begin between 4 to 2 months from the PD receiving this message. To summarize, SCP-001 is humankind, specifically its decision-making. When a person makes a decision, a paradimension may be created. The multiverse has a limit on the number of paradimensions it can have, and since paradimensions can have paradimensions, they are quickly approaching the ZK-class cross-reality failure event. The SCP Foundation of R42 is approximately 17 years ahead of PD, which allowed them to research and develop containment procedures to contain the anomaly and save the multiverse. R42's SCP Foundation discovered SCP-001 5 years before writing the file we're reading now. Aside from that, they developed 2 operations, Castling and Minimal Gain, to slow paradimension creation and prevent the ZK-class cross-reality failure event. In Stage 1 of Operation Minimal Gain, the Foundation began with neutralizing and decommissioning all of their contained anomalies under the classification of Euclid or Keter. specifically those that were expensive to contain or requiring high levels of personnel and researchers. Stage 2 saw Operation Castling be commenced. The R-42 SCP Foundation launched rockets with variant C global amnestic dispersing warheads and took control over all countries in order to hold power over all humankind. In Stage 3, the Foundation began to move their world to a more natural state, destroying all hazardous, radioactive, chemical, and bacteriological objects, removing dams, and stopping oil extractions. During Stage 3, Stage 4 began. The R-42 SCP Foundation began eliminating humanity in third world countries by use of viral and biological attacks. Stage 5 was a wider spread attack on humanity, where the SCP Foundation added deactivation-resistant viral agents to water treatment and collection plants, food products, medication, and household items of developed countries. By Stage 6, only 0.1% of humanity remained, and they were targeted with drone strikes or put into concentration camps for elimination. Stage 7. Of the remaining survivors, the Foundation sampled them to find the fittest of those left to preserve humankind. Stage 8 saw 15,000 of these people put into indefinite cryosleep, and the remaining survivors were eliminated. Stage 9 saw the destruction of the remaining SCP Foundation personnel. We move on to a list of proposals that were made before or during Operations Castling and Minimal Gain. Proposals rejected include the use of SCP objects or other technologies to eliminate derivative dimensions, the development of nanobots with the capability to control human decision-making capabilities and eliminate variability, full replacement of humanity with bionic hybrids acting explicitly within standard behavioral models, unification of humanity into a neural network with control given to an AI control unit, and the destruction of Earth and/or all of its inhabitants. While most of these seem like clear solutions that would prevent the elimination of humanity at the SCP Foundation's hand, these proposals were all rejected for one reason: the SCP Foundation did not have enough time. One proposal was accepted, however: the use of SCP-0000. This appears to be the solution the R-42 SCP Foundation concocted to fight SCP-001 and potentially save the multiverse. It poses the question: if the R-42 SCP Foundation used this same anomaly to contain SCP-001, as proven by the fact they no longer exist, will PD do the same? The file explains that the R-42 SCP Foundation opened a dimensional wormhole into PD, as they do not know at the time if paradimensions could cause the creation of more paradimensions. In doing this, the SCP Foundation seemingly infected PD with the ability to create paradimensions. The author of this file goes on to explain that the R-42 SCP Foundation had plans to attack PD and use Operations Castling and Minimal Gain in the dimension. However, they could not access the dimension again, and they believe that the Foundation personnel of PD would have made use of Thaumiel-class anomalies to save themselves and their world. A note from R-42's Overseer Council is left for PD. If the Apollyon destruction was not enough, the Overseer Council is involved. The importance of the neutralization of this anomaly cannot be forgotten, so the Overseer Council explained to PD: "The world has existed before us and must remain after us. Our multiverse is ill, and the name of the illness is humanity. SCP-001. The only way out is SCP-0000 will cease to become a threat with its help. It is in our power to leave a chance for other sapient species that, perhaps, will not be affected by the same anomaly, or will find a way to get rid of it before it's too late. We, the O5 Council, and other survivors from R-42 have chosen our fate. We hope you will do the same." What is this SCP-0000? How did the SCP Foundation of R-42 find this solution? The file for SCP-0000 is placed within this SCP-001 file. SCP-0000 is a Paradox Thaumiel-class anomaly without any containment procedures. SCP-0000 is a device that, once activated, will destroy the universe it was activated in. It will also destroy all paradimensions that are not creating other paradimensions. As such, PD would not be destroyed. However, the billions or trillions of other paradimensions the R42 parent dimension created will be destroyed. PD is left with the harrowing decision to continue living or destroy itself to save the rest of the multiverse. In the file, a note from R42's Joan Simpson is written for an SCP Foundation Overseer 05-1. As part of Operations Castling and Minimal Gain, the remaining Foundation employees were allowed one family member to uphold morale. Joan is not writing for R42's 05-1. Instead, she's writing for PD's 05-1, this dimension's version of her father. She begins with wondering whether she can call this version of 05-1 her father, as her version of her father recently passed away. She remembers the day the Foundation employees were allowed to choose that one family member they would save for the time being. Her father was opposed to allowing two family members, as he claimed it would cause unnecessary stress and schisms among the remaining few hundred Foundation staff. 05-1 chose to have Joan over her mother, and she understood everything by the look in his eyes, and grew angry, but that feeling is long gone now. She began to work with her father and the remaining Foundation personnel that called themselves hostages behind the backs of those higher up the ranks. On days she felt sad, Joan and her father would go up to the surface of the earth in hazmat suits, sitting on the grass and watching over the empty city at the bottom of the mountain. No humanity remained, with the only life she could see being birds. Her father promised her that they'd return there and build a giant monument to humanity at the center of the city. She knew this was a lie. Joan remembers when someone proposed that they should open a portal, the one that opened to PD. This was their fatal mistake, as after that the paradimension began replicating paradimensions. The countdown went down to months again, and the promise he made to his daughter became impossible. 05-1 died and left the position vacant. Joan says to the PD's 05-1 that she doesn't care whether they destroy their world or not, or whether the universe will continue to exist, or if there will be new life in it. Her world was crushed long ago. The note also reads the following: "It's good that this message is encrypted with your key that was passed on to me, or these lines would have been deleted. Everyone wants to save the world, but who needs it like this? Empty and cold, without those to appreciate its beauty, without humanity. Do whatever you think is right. I truly feel better now. Love you. Faithfully yours, Joan Simpson." We're not too sure if PD went through with destroying their universe to save the multiverse, but it seems that whatever decision was made would cause the destruction of that universe, whether that be through the use of SCP-0000 or the ZK-class cross-reality failure event. Humanity will cease. But maybe if they make the decision to use SCP-0000, sapient life can begin to exist again, and hopefully, no paradimensions will be made from their decisions. Decisions are an extremely innate part of humanity. You decided to get out of bed this morning. You decided to open up your computer or phone, and you decided to watch this video. Who knows the amount of paradimensions we may have created today? But in our world, we're not at risk. But in the SCP Foundation's universe, anything can be anomalous, even humanity. Researcher Martin pushed the deck against the door, hoping it would hold long enough for him to find an alternate escape route. He wasn't thinking about the long term. He couldn't afford to. With the Foundation's global reach, he'd never truly escape them, never be able to make it away, condemned to spend the rest of his life on the run from the organization he'd devoted his life to. It was too overwhelming to even attempt to reckon with that, especially with the pounding of a fist against the door. He scrabbled around, opening windows to try and see if there was a safe way down. Technically, none of this was his fault, at least in his mind. The administrative login information he'd used to access the file shouldn't have been left so easy to find. That was just poor cybersecurity on the Foundation's part. Researcher Martin had been tasked with compiling information on SCP-001, one of the most infamous anomalies ever encountered in the Foundation's long and storied history, or multiple of them at least. What Martin had come to learn was there were numerous entities within the Foundation's files that all acted as proposals for SCP-001. Some were creatures, the typical kind of anomalous entities the Foundation dealt with on a regular basis, but some of the proposals focused on more abstract anomalies, and somehow, those were more existentially terrifying than any evil godlike being bent on destroying reality. Theories about the very source of anomalies themselves, that their very existence might have been predetermined by some otherworldly force. Then there were the other proposals that named parts of the Foundation as the true SCP-001. Those seemed to suck researcher Martin in like a vortex, dragging him down a deep, dark rabbit hole that made him start to question everything he thought he knew about working for the SCP Foundation, and the one that had toppled him into a full-blown conspiracy-obsessed stupor that there was no coming back from: the Noir Box proposal. The weighted head of a battering ram splintered the wooden surface of the door, spraying fragments over the room. The table propped up to keep it shut toppled under the force of the entry as a squad of shadowy figures in full black combat gear rushed inside. The mobile task force surrounded the cowering researcher, keeping their weapons trained on him. Researcher Martin, pleading for his life, started gesturing to the walls of the room around him that had been plastered with hastily scrawled diagrams and equations. Martin tried desperately to find some concise, easy-to-understand way of explaining to the soldiers what he'd uncovered. They only picked up on a few words like many worlds hypothesis and splitting universes, but ultimately they didn't follow what he was saying and weren't sent there to hear him out. All the MTF had been told was that researcher Martin had breached Foundation security and now posed a risk of exposing sensitive information about SCP-001. There was only one path of recourse: termination. However, unbeknownst to them, Dr. Martin was fine. At least a version of him was. One who never learned about the Noir Box proposal for SCP-001 and hadn't gone mad trying to unravel its mysteries. Instead, he was a respected higher-ranking member of the Foundation who was alive and well, in a completely different timeline. The formation of the SCP Foundation has always been shrouded in mystery, with nobody really knowing what the true origin of the organization is, and what is merely just a cover story left in the archives to keep the truth hidden. SCP-001, the Noir Box proposal at least, might hold the answers to the questions surrounding how the Foundation came to be. 3 times over. Known as the Tindalo's Trinity, the file pertaining to this anomaly is buried deep in the SCP Foundation's database, under layers upon layers of encryption and security clearance requirements. It requires someone at the very top level of the Foundation to access, a member of either the Overseer Council or the Foundation's High Command, or Overwatch. But wait, what are those? Aren't they the same thing? Well, yes and no. The exact name of the high-ranking secretive group that runs the Foundation has often been interchangeable, whether they're known as the O5 Council, the Overseer Council, etc. But what if it wasn't just many different names for the same governing body, but actually separate names for alternate versions of the ones who control the SCP Foundation? Allow us to explain. All 3 of these groups, the Overseer Council, High Command, and Overwatch, have come to a consensus that SCP-001 is an anomaly that connects with the Foundation's very origin. They believe that the founder of the SCP Foundation, also known as SCP-001, was anomalous in some way that caused them to interact with time in an unusual fashion. The triumvirate of councils are in agreement that around the time that the SCP Foundation was formed, 3 distinct timelines were generated, given the anomalous nature of the organization's founder. Each of these timelines drastically altered the nature of SCP-001, featuring a different version in each one. In the first, commonly known as Timeline HC, where the Foundation is run by a High Command, SCP-001 was an anomalous human corpse. This timeline's SCP-001 still exhibited all the behavioral characteristics of a normal human being, but could additionally replicate itself at an erratic, uncontrollable rate, usually when performing tasks that could have multiple possible outcomes. SCP-001 in Timeline HC also interacted anachronistically with its environment, passing through solid matter that predated it or would outlast it. So it had to be contained in a room that was constructed before it existed as an anomaly. This timeline's SCP-001 was responsible for conceiving the idea for the SCP Foundation. and was able to promote a significant interest in the organization. However, they were assassinated before the Foundation was officially codified, with the culprits being a version of Mobile Task Force ALP-0, who are believed to have originated from either of the other two timelines. While this seems to have been done to deter the Foundation forming in this timeline, it seems to have had the opposite effect. Despite the assassination of SCP-001 occurring before the official formation of the SCP Foundation in Timeline HC, this version of the Foundation was successfully codified by the 13 members of what they referred to as High Command. Given the anomalous circumstances around the death of SCP-001, it provided a catalyst for the organization to immediately establish itself as this timeline's protection against the threat posed by anomalous entities. The body of SCP-001 was placed in the building that had been its childhood home, securing it somewhere that predated them to negate their anomalous properties. This made them the first anomaly contained by Timeline HC's version of the SCP Foundation, posthumously garnering them the official designation of SCP-001. So that's the first of our three timelines at play. The events that unfold in the second are considerably different. In this timeline, Timeline OC, the Foundation was initially created by a different SCP-001. This entity, referred to primarily as the Founder, appropriately enough, was a human being known to possess anomalous temporal abilities. The Founder was known to also be immortal, showing no visible signs of aging, and with a resistance to external damage that prevented him from being directly killed. Any injuries he sustained could be healed, but only at the same rate typical of an average human being. The temporal side of his anomalous properties pertained to predicting the future. The Founder was able to, with an inarguable level of precision and accuracy, forecast events before they occurred. His foresight, it appeared to the Foundation, was not inciting these events to happen as he predicted them. However, everything he ever predicted would occur became an inevitability, impossible to delay, avert, or alter through any means. During the events of Timeline OC, and as his preferred nickname implies, the Founder was the sole figure responsible for establishing this version of the SCP Foundation. In this course of events, the O5 Council of this timeline were known as the Overseer Council. It was, however, while he was in the process of establishing the organization that things started to go awry. Whether he was able to predict this occurrence or not is unknown, although it seems to have corresponded with the MTF-ALP-0 assassination of SCP-001 in the other timeline, Timeline HC. In Timeline OC, at the same time as the assassination in Timeline HC, the Founder began to exhibit his anomalous temporal properties in front of the original members of Overseer Council. However, it should also be noted that there was no recorded presence of MTF-ALP-0 in Timeline OC. Believing the Founder to be a potential danger to the Foundation they had all helped to create, the founding Overseer Council classified him as an anomalous threat. They immediately devised a set of containment measures for the Founder, now designating him as SCP-001, the first anomaly contained by this timeline's version of the Foundation. He was placed within a standard humanoid containment cell and given regular meals, while personnel were forbidden to communicate with him. Given his role in establishing the Foundation in this version of events, SCP-001 is naturally in favor of containing and analyzing anomalies. However, not when that includes him, and insisted that he be released. According to one of his predictions for forthcoming events, he requested to be allowed to build a device, but refused to elaborate on the intended purpose of it. SCP-001 even refused to allow other members of Foundation personnel to construct the device on his behalf for testing purposes. The third of these timelines is referred to as Timeline OW, wherein the leading body of the Foundation are known as Overwatch. Here, just like the previous iterations of its history, the description of SCP-001 and their role in forming the SCP Foundation differs. In this timeline, SCP-001 is an anomaly that consists of two distinct parts. The first of these is a figure not dissimilar from the Founder. Referred to as SCP-001-1, this person is also a functionally immortal human who doesn't age and can't heal rapidly from damage. SCP-001-1 also advocates for securing and analyzing anomalies. However, this includes himself, as he doesn't object to his own containment, or that of the second component of this SCP-001. Known as SCP-001-A, This device is capable of accurately calculating any and all possible outcomes of any event that is input into it. Unlike the founder, who seemed to possess a foresight able to predict the only inevitable outcome of the future, SCP-001-A is able to account for the possibility of multiple potential futures, even down to accounting for how its own predictions could potentially influence or alter outcomes. In layman's terms, at least one of the eventualities predicted by SCP-001-A will always be accurate, unless the predictions are to do with its own future, or the future of SCP-001-1. In this instance, the device will always produce one of two assumptions that are incorrect. Either that SCP-001-1 was killed after an assassination attempt and never constructed SCP-001-A, but that's impossible after all. SCP-001-A exists. It's already been made in this timeline. The other incorrect prediction it can give is that SCP-001-1 also exhibits the same anomalous properties as the prediction machine, more akin to the founder, and that SCP-001-A was never constructed in the first place. But again, that can't be right, in this timeline anyway. According to records within Timeline OW, their version of the founder, who is of course SCP-001-1, encountered a version of Mobile Task Force ALP-0 from one of the other timelines. They presented the founder of the OW timeline with detailed blueprints for the construction of SCP-001-A. The device's completion coincided with the assassination in Timeline HC, and the corresponding anomalous incident in Timeline OC. After this point, MTF-ALP-0 departs from Timeline OW. This version of the SCP Foundation is then created to study the device, SCP-001-A, with this founder and a group of his close friends, who would become this Foundation's Overwatch. Following this initial research group's discovery of other anomalous phenomenon that threatened the rest of society, the team's goal expanded to research anomalies and protect the world from the danger they posed. However, the rest of the Overwatch began to age at a natural rate. While the founder didn't recognize this, he volunteered to be contained and studied, thus becoming a component of this timeline's SCP-001. Stepping back and looking at all of these timelines, there seems to be a number of marked similarities, particularly relating to how the Foundation was established and how a figure, usually the one who founded the organization, possessed anomalous means of interacting with time and temporality. Under normal circumstances, interaction between alternate timelines should be impossible, but the preservation of information about all three on the SCP Foundation's database has somehow enabled all three timelines to communicate with each other. Through exchanging intelligence via their own versions of the database, all three iterations of the Foundation across the three timelines have learned that almost all of the anomalies they have encountered since being established are exclusive to their own timeline. There are a total of 17 anomalies that have been confirmed to exist across the three timelines. But there is a concerning factor in all this: the presence of an anachronistic military group referring to itself as MTF-ALP-0. This Mobile Task Force's direct involvement in the events of both Timeline HC, where they assassinated SCP-001, and Timeline OW, where they provided schematics for SCP-001-A, raises an awful lot of questions. This MTF had to be acting on orders of the Foundation, but which version in which timeline? The consensus among the leading committees of all three, the High Command, Overseer Council, and Overwatch, is that at some unknown date in the future, each of them will inevitably send their own version of MTF-ALP-0 back in time to alter the Foundation's past. And in a sense, they've already done it, and seen how this altered the circumstances in order to inadvertently create the Foundation. But this poses the risk of one of these timelines overriding another, thus meaning all information garnered by alternate iterations of the Foundation could be lost. So, putting their heads together, these Foundation leading committees come to the conclusion that they need to attempt to merge all three timelines. And it seems the way to do so is using the device that Timeline OC's founder wanted to build, and that Timeline OW's founder was able to construct. This device is how this proposal for SCP-001 was given its nickname, the Noir Box. The intention of the Noir Box is to shunt all three timelines into a stable joint path, like turning loose strands into a single length of twine. As such, the leading committees of all three different timelines have agreed to share their intel on how each of them can safely create their own noir boxes, and all 3 will be used to merge the timelines. Every member of High Command, the Overseer Council, and Overwatch sign off on it, but whether or not the plan works is another matter. The fabric of time is delicate, and one wrong move could tear everything apart. It was 1948 in Villablanca, Guatemala. As night fell, 2 young boys, Carlos and Miguel, played a game of soccer in the street. It was a quiet town full of humble, hard-working people, and they were about to come face to face with a monster. Typically, when something like this happened, you'd know exactly who to call: the SCP Foundation. Problem is, while these days we can generally depend on the hard-working agents and researchers of the Foundation to save us from any anomalous supernatural threats with their tactics, expertise, and equipment, it wasn't always this way. There was a time before the SCP Foundation became the titan of anomaly combating prowess it is today, and it's that time that we're focusing on today. It all comes back to a strange and violent creature wandering the darkened streets of Guatemala, or as Dr. Charles Ogden Gears proposed we call it, SCP-001, the prototype. SCP-001 is a topic that we've covered in a number of videos, but even then we can never quite capture the full scope of this wily designation. What is SCP-001 is probably one of the most loaded questions you can possibly ask a member of the SCP Foundation, and it may be your last, as the majority of the files under the SCP-001 umbrella are highly classified for pretty much everyone under Level 5 clearance. 001 covers a large number of potentially anomalous items, entities, and concepts, from the dreaded Scarlet King to the awe-inspiring Gate Guardian, to the very SCP Foundation itself, through the eyes of the charmingly incompetent Unusual Incidents Unit of the FBI. Perhaps they're all real, perhaps only one of them is, and the rest are in there as a smokescreen. Perhaps they're all fake, red herrings laid down to hide the trail to something even more secretive and fantastic. All we know is that 001 seemed to be gathered around a collection of loose themes: the beginnings of the Foundation, events or entities that could end the Foundation or even the world, and key formative moments in the Foundation's history. Dr. Gear's proposal for SCP-001 lies firmly in the latter camp, and if you keep watching and listening closely, you'll see exactly why. Back to Carlos and Miguel, the pair of 11-year-olds playing football on the quiet back streets of Villablanca. They were kicking the ball back and forth when they heard a strange screeching noise in the distance. At first they thought it was some kind of injured bird, squawking desperately for help. Being good kids, they didn't waste a second running into the action, heading further into the outskirts of town. However, the creature they encountered on that rural road was certainly no bird. When they first saw it hunched over a few meters in front of them, they thought it must have been a horribly injured man. He was deadly thin, with gray-brown skin that looked either bruised or burned. It was twitching and weeping, its chest heaving in heavy labored pants. Its limbs were jerking wildly, as though the creature was being electrocuted. "Hey mister, are you okay?" Carlos called out in Spanish. In that moment, what they had wrongly thought was a man just froze up, finally registering their presence. Immediately, the 2 boys knew something was wrong, as the creature slowly rose to its full height, well over 6 feet, towering over the 2 of them, even at a distance. They noticed something was wrong with its limbs. They were too long, well out of proportion with its human-sized torso. It didn't have hands and feet, at least not in the way that humans do. Instead, its slender ankles terminated in long black spikes, and its wrists each split off into 3 equally black claws. But worst of all was its face, if you could even call what that monster had a face. Its head was split in the middle by a huge mouth. At first, its gnarly lips were pursed, but they soon slid open with a low, rumbling roar. The boys could feel their knees shaking as they saw the monster's mouth full of long, rotten fangs. Something started sliding up the dark passage of the monster's throat. A translucent, milky blue sphere. Was that thing an eye? It made the 2 boys feel sick to even look at it. That's when the eye started to glow, and the space around the monster began to shimmer slightly. like some kind of terrible sorcery. As the two boys felt a strange force pulling at them, trying to tug them into the creature's embrace, they were suddenly jogged from their frightened paralysis and decided to finally make a run for it. There was no doubt about what had just happened. They'd encountered a demon in the flesh, intent on taking their souls straight to hell. When the two of them told their parents, they were met at first with disbelief. Two young boys saw something that frightened them in the dark, perhaps an animal, if anything at all, and they'd let their imaginations run wild. It was typical of children. However, things didn't seem quite so simple when more sightings started popping up. People all across the town of Villablanca started seeing this monster, all with matching descriptions. A huge, emaciated beast with a mouth for a face, its glowing blue eye nested inside. The natural excuses circulated at first. Perhaps the creature was a local prankster in a costume. This would be comforting to believe, but how many pranksters in costumes can completely disappear before your very eyes? The monster's eye would glow, and just like that, it would simply vanish. As fear and paranoia began spreading through the town, people suggested that perhaps it was a case of mass hysteria, fear and panic taking over rationality. But by this point, things had gotten worse. Carlos and Miguel, the two boys who'd first discovered the demon on the back road, had become sick. They were experiencing severe nausea, vomiting, headaches, and diarrhea. Their bodies weakened. Lesions began developing on their skin. As their conditions deteriorated, and it seemed as though nobody was capable of treating them, a rumor spread that the monster was somehow inducing this sickness. The town doctor didn't have the expertise to diagnose it, but the boys were suffering from acute radiation sickness, and they wouldn't be the only ones. Many of the people who'd reported sightings and close encounters with the monster started coming down with severe radiation sickness. To the townspeople, it just seemed to be a demon spreading some invisible plague among them, but the horrors wouldn't stop there. It seemed that this demon also liked to take a more direct approach to harming the townsfolk, because not long after the sickness broke out, people started disappearing. There were never any bodies. The most that would ever be found were tattered items of clothing left at the site of the disappearances, or blood smeared across the walls or ground. Before they knew it, 7 of their people were gone. It seemed that, for all intents and purposes, God had abandoned them. They were playthings of the demon now. Thankfully for the townsfolk who weren't yet irradiated or vanished, an organization was forming, one that might be their only chance at salvation. Someday in the future, it would become known as the SCP Foundation, but it had a lot to learn before it got there. You see, the reason that this iteration of SCP-001 is known as the prototype is that, if Dr. Gears is to be believed, it may be the first anomalous entity that they ever truly faced. So naturally, getting the creature captured and contained didn't go quite as smoothly as most of their modern jobs, despite the comparative simplicity of this old threat. General Machoy, an ex-military operator that became part of what we'll once again call the precursors to the Foundation, led a research and recovery team into Villablanca to hunt down and retrieve the beast that had been causing all this misery and death among the townsfolk. However, this proved to be easier said than done. While its bestial appearance might fool people into thinking the monster was just a mindless animal, later writings on the creature would describe it as both incredibly cunning and terrifyingly fast. When a group of armed personnel first tried to engage the creature directly, they had no idea that they were walking right into the middle of a bloodbath. They believed they had it surrounded on another rural back road, advancing with assault rifles, when the creature flipped out and started killing them. The prototype proved to have frightening offensive capabilities. Its 3 dark claws easily carved through the armor of the soldiers trying desperately to contain it. The creature moved so fast that none of them could reliably draw a bead on it, and if any of them could, it was holding their severed head before they had a chance to squeeze the trigger. But death by the creature's claws was one of the more pleasant ways it could kill its victims. At one point during an engagement with precursor troops, it opened its mouth and unveiled its glowing blue eye. At this point, one of the soldiers screamed and suddenly seemed to be sucked inside of himself, completely disappearing. The prototype's blue eye glowed again, and it once again just teleported away from the scene. A number of soldiers who survived this altercation later needed to be treated for acute radiation sickness. Researchers eventually managed to figure out what was actually happening with the creature. It had the ability to manifest micro-singularities. tiny black holes that it used to both teleport from place to place and defend itself from attacks when necessary. These singularities wouldn't stick around for long, a few seconds at most, but they had the terrifying side effect of putting out massive amounts of radiation. This is why it was making so much of the town and the recovery team sick via mere proximity. Thankfully, in finding out the creature's strength, they also managed to find out its weaknesses. Its powers were dampened by high humidity, bright lights, and especially intense strobing lights. It was through the use of these lights that the creature was finally captured and brought into ADRX-19, a complex that would later become Site-19 for containment. There, its containment procedures were devised by one of the burgeoning organization's top minds, Dr. Herman Keter. However, Dr. Keter would sadly never actually live to see the duration of the prototype's containment at ADRX-19. He was tragically killed by the monster, though his name would live on as the designation for anomalies that were particularly difficult to contain. It was thanks to him that his co-workers realized lead-lined walls, a reinforced steel door, a 100% humidity environment, and the frequent application of high-intensity strobe lights were the best way to keep the prototype locked up for good. To this day, this iteration of SCP-001 is a fascinating reminder that the SCP Foundation wasn't always the juggernaut it is today. There was once a time where they had as little idea of what they were doing as the rest of us. There's no better representation of this than the file itself. It was an era before object classes and conventional designation numbers. The file is written in a sketchy, disorganized manner and arranged into item designation number, warning, description of item, detail of current containment, report, and addendum. As with any experience in life, it's always worth asking, what can we learn from the SCP Foundation's experience with its possible first anomaly, a monster that seems almost nostalgically quaint by today's standards? Perhaps the greatest message is that everything is a work in progress. It was only by determination and persistence that the Foundation could go from an organization challenged by a monster like the Prototype to going toe-to-toe with real heavy hitters like the Scarlet King. How very inspirational. You've been walking for days. Your body aches. You're dripping with sweat from the heat of the sun bearing down overhead. And yet you're wrapped up in layers upon layers of clothing. Even your face is covered, and you're wearing thick black goggles so that not a single centimeter of your body is exposed. Your journey has been long, and you feel like you might die from exhaustion or from overheating due to these multiple layers of clothes. But dying is better than being exposed. You saw it happen when your entire team changed. The light cannot be trusted. Not even for a fraction of a second. It's been like this for years. You've learned and survived through painful experience. Many of those you used to know cannot say the same. You've been alone for so long. You might have given up all hope if it wasn't for the distress signal coming from a nearby SCP Foundation containment facility, Site-46. Any kind of survivors would be better than nothing, no matter what kind of sorry shape they were in, as long as they were still human. You find your way to an opening in the side of a mountain and slide into the cave, hoping you weren't spotted. The whole world is crawling with those things now. You can't let yourself be seen. As you trudge down the cave towards the entrance, you see what looks like a huge black snail trail splattered on the ground, leading into the facility. You try to avoid it and press on. You don't even need a key card to enter. The door has been left ajar. The facility reeks of those things, but you can't see any of them. You just hope they've moved on and left some human survivors in their wake. The place looks abandoned. Every step you take echoes through the empty halls. When you find that the elevator's out, you take the stairs all the way down to level B5, Keter Containment. Lucky for you, it seems all the cells are empty now. The horrors that were kept inside of them have all long since flown the coop. You keep following that slimy black trail until you find an abandoned office. There are no people here anymore. Just a broken barricade, some empty medicine bottles, and a bucket that the people inside the office had apparently been using as a toilet. You breathe a sigh of disappointment at finding no one alive here, but you're at least relieved to be out of the sun. You can finally remove your jacket and head wrap. With your uncovered eyes, you notice that a nearby computer terminal is still powered up. You sit down at the desk and turn on the monitor. Because of the emergency procedures put into place in a K-class scenario like this, safeguards no longer apply. You can access all the information you need, up to and including finding out what actually happened. In the dull glow of a nearby emergency light, you see a dark shape slumping through the halls in shadow. You tense up, then exhale as it slithers off into an adjoining hall. You're safe, for now. The terminal has finally loaded and authenticated your access. You're staring at the file for SD Lock's proposal for SCP-001 when day breaks. It's the only name you can give the apocalypse your world is currently experiencing. This is one of the only anomalies in the entire history of the SCP Foundation to be given the Apollyon Containment class, meaning containment is truly impossible. SCP-001 is the most dangerous enemy that the Foundation and planet Earth has ever faced. It's always been the principle of the SCP Foundation to battle in the dark so that the civilian world can thrive in the light. But now the light has become the enemy. Anyone exposed to any amount of sunlight for even the briefest period of time is subjected to the effects of SCP-001, and those effects are beyond horrifying. The SCP Foundation Administrator released an urgent memo telling Foundation personnel to make their way to Site-19 at all costs, because they need all the help they can get. Those exposed to SCP-001 in the process are no longer considered human. Their new designation is SCP-001-A. These new entities are to be avoided at all costs. But in case of emergencies, the Administrator says it is permitted to cut off parts of your transformed comrades and eat them to avoid starvation. No attempt should be made to kill them, since you won't succeed. You'll just put yourself at risk. When the sun changed and became SCP-001, it instantly affected 6.8 billion innocent people. The second the visible light touched them, whether it was from the sun itself or even reflected off the moon, their bodies liquefied, melting like candle wax into puddles of living gelatinous slime. This effect isn't isolated to humans either. Any biological entity exposed to sunlight immediately underwent the same irreversible melting process into SCP-001-A, and the horror had only just begun. People transformed into SCP-001-A will remain shades of their former intelligence and personality. They may even try to will their new gooey mass into a shape resembling their original form. However, these individuals will lose their sense of self if they come into contact with other instances of SCP-001-A. When they come together, 001-A instances will bond on a molecular level, wading up into horrific giant blobs with only one purpose: integrating more matter into their bodies. That's why they have to be avoided at all costs. You continue to search the computer terminal for answers. Perhaps there was some kind of contingency plan put in place for this, some way to reverse the effects, or at least escape the nightmare Earth has become. Instead, you find a series of attachments linked to the SCP-001 file, detailing what seems to be the last days of the people who barricaded themselves in the facility. Most prominent among these were researcher Dr. Logan Igata, her partner Ari, a security officer named Commander Anad, and a few others. Dr. Igata had locked herself in the office, where she recorded her final messages to the world. In the first audio log, Dr. Igata and her companions seemed afraid, but hopeful that there may be some way out of this situation. Dr. Igata reported that most of the workers at the facility were transformed during the initial event. Their melted bodies had fused outside the facility, and now they were trying to bust their way back in. The defenses had held so far though, and they seemed confident they would hold long enough for them to figure out a way to escape this awful situation. You open the second attachment, an incident report, and realize things may not have been as hopeful as Dr. Igata let on. She reported hearing the huge mass of melted creatures hammering on the door outside again, begging for them to come out and experience the sun with them. They wanted desperately to add to their ever-growing biomass. In order to experiment with what exactly would happen, they sent out one of their few remaining D-classes wearing a full protective suit. He didn't last long. The huge creature grabbed him with tentacles made of reconstituted flesh. It began ripping off his protective suit as he screamed for mercy. It was a monster made of dozens of people and animals. He could never overpower it. The second the sun touched his skin, he melted away and was absorbed by the great mass holding him in place. Guns were ineffective against these SCP-001-A super entities. Fire would do no good. It seemed that extremely low temperatures were the only way to slow the immense blobs down. And even then, not permanently. There was one ray of light in the darkness. The site director had a secret tunnel underneath his office, connected to a tram that could hopefully take them directly to Site-19 without risk of SCP-001 exposure. It was a good plan, and by far the best option they had available to them. But the best plans often don't work in practice. You open the next attachment on the terminal. This time, it's a video feed. You can actually see Dr. Logan Igata, and she looks harrowed by what she's experienced. As it turns out, while the others, including her partner Ari, attempted to escape through the tunnel, something had happened. Dr. Igata heard Ari's voice over her radio, but there was something wrong with it. It was too low, too guttural, and filled with gurgles. SCP-001 had gotten her. She was changed. The monster from above had crawled in through the ceiling. It had taken them, all of them, and converted them into something less than human. Any hope of escape now seemed gone. Ari told Dr. Igata that it would be fine, that it was such a bright, beautiful, sunny day outside, and she was wasting it locked up inside that office. She tormented Dr. Igata with their shared memories of picnics in the park on sunny days in the past. The monster with Ari's voice did everything it could to try to convince Dr. Igata to give up and join them. But she wasn't ready to go just yet. You look away from the screen when you hear a sound in the corner. You see a dark puddle of some unknown substance, and then some skeletal hands rising out of it. The hands are pulling themselves out of the puddle, followed by a skeletal face covered in matted hair. You have to stop yourself from screaming, until a flash from a nearby security light makes the figure disappear. It's a normal puddle once again. Your mind is playing tricks on you. You open the next attachment, another video, and see that Dr. Igata's condition has deteriorated. She looked pale, frantic, and thin. She was using a knife to draw her own blood onto a piece of blood-stained parchment covered in strange symbols. Igata ranted about her theory. What if 001 took the minds and bodies of its victims, but not their souls? Through performing some kind of arcane blood ritual, she hoped to at least rescue and keep the soul of Ari, even if her mind and body were lost. You open the next attachment. It seemed that Agata's ritual worked, but not in the way she hoped. The twisted soul of Ari, driven mad by SCP-001, had taken over the file. It begins corrupting the text of the SCP-001 file into crazy ranting about how futile it is to fight. It then cuts to an even more frightening video feed. Dr. Igata, in her sleep, tossing and turning in a makeshift bed in the corner of her office. The camera approaches her, in first person, and lingers over her sleeping body. An oily skeletal hand reaches past the camera and runs its fingers through Dr. Igata's hair. It's that exact same hand you saw reaching out of that black puddle earlier. You must have seen Ari's lingering spirit. With a lump in your throat, you open the next attachment and watch the video. You see Dr. Igata, now truly broken. She'd been haunted by Ari's demonic spirit for a long time now, and it has clearly taken its toll. She is waving around a handgun while she speaks. She now believes there's only one way to escape, but not like this. She doesn't want the gun to draw attention to her body. She doesn't want to become part of that mass, even if she is dead. She opens a drawer on her desk she's recording at and places the gun inside. Dr. Igata then apologizes to her loved ones who are likely long since dead or assimilated and turns off the recording for the last time. In that moment, you realize there's a single drawer in the desk in front of you. When you reach forward and open it, You see the same handgun Dr. Igata was holding is laying inside. You pick it up and study it, weighing your options. Perhaps there truly is no other way out. Then you see an update on the file. One more attachment has been added while you were studying the gun. You feel your heart pounding in your chest as you reach forward and open the attachment. The text has been changed entirely. The file on SCP-001 is now a poem, an ode to the sun and to ultimate togetherness. Then a video file spontaneously opens itself on the screen. It's a video of you, shot from behind. You see those oily skeletal hands reaching for you in the dark, just like they did with Dr. Igata. In that moment, you panic and fire the gun behind you, hoping to scare off the spirit. Instead, the sound of the gunshots attracts something far worse. The immense blob of screaming melted flesh charges towards the office. You try to barricade the door, but it is not enough. The flesh seeps and bursts through and grabs you in its meaty tentacles. You scream and try to escape, but it won't save you. Nothing will save you. The flesh carries you upstairs, out through the empty halls, out into the cave. You can see the light in the distance as the blob ferries you towards it. You won't be alone for much longer. In fact, you won't be alone ever again. Oh boy, here we go again. SCP-001. Over 30 different bizarre anomalies claim this #1 spot in the database, and in a sense, they're all right. Or are they? If you're feeling confused already, that's fine. We don't expect that to change. Because today we're dealing with one of the most strange and intricate 001 entries out there, Keter duty. Just pray you never get assigned to it. You see, when you work around weirdness, you sometimes get a little weird yourself. And nobody deals with more weirdness than employees of the SCP Foundation. They regularly rub elbows with everything from godlike cicadas to hyper-infectious supernatural viruses. And as the famous Tom Jones song goes, it's not unusual to suddenly take on anomalous traits after consistently working with anomalies for years. That's how the lyrics go, right? Anyway, one of the Foundation's most iconic researchers, Dr. Jack Bright, is technically just an anomalous necklace himself. But outside of some famous exceptions, the SCP Foundation is in the business of containing anomalous entities, not hiring them on and giving them a paycheck and retirement plan. That's why if you suddenly start displaying anomalous traits while on the Foundation payroll, you might receive a company memo assigning you to the dreaded Keter duty. But what is Keter duty, and what kind of anomalous traits can get you assigned to it? Let's start with the second question first. The official Keter duty guidelines list a surprisingly vast number of afflictions. These include chronic anomalous illnesses such as lycanthropy, turning into a werewolf, something called Stevenson syndrome, and the incredibly unpleasant-sounding photonic gastric discharge syndrome. You could also be placed on Keter duty because you're suffering from the manifestation of spectral phenomena, including being haunted by spirits, whether they're there to torment you or protect you. The sudden expression of anomalous traits in your DNA, which is unsettlingly vague, will also land you on Keter duty, as will the awakening of powerful magical or psionic abilities, especially ones which could be used in a potentially offensive manner. The Keter duty assignment, which involves being relocated and forced to work in a different highly secretive location that will be discussed soon, is framed as a punishment for the people involved. That way, it discourages Foundation employees from ever trying to develop anomalous powers on purpose. So what exactly is Keter duty and where does it happen? To reinforce that punishment element method, the Foundation has spread lies among their own personnel about where the job takes place, often involving being posted in some of the least desirable Foundation areas imaginable. These include Point Nemo, the area of the ocean farthest from any place of land on Earth, Pyongyang in North Korea, Stonehenge, Roswell, Lunar Area 32, and a number of Foundation waste disposal sites. However, the reality of where those on Keter duty end up is even stranger. Site 100, which in this particular instance is the true SCP-001. This Thaumiel-class anomaly is perhaps the most unique of all multi-anomaly Foundation containment sites, a bizarre labyrinth of non-Euclidean geometry that defies true explanation, but we'll do the best we can. In a sense, Site 100 is a facility with a mind of its own. It's a sprawling underground base with a layout that defies space-time, and what's more, it undergoes so-called migration events. Every so often, it will begin to exhibit a sense of dimensional instability before teleporting to a different location somewhere on Earth. Currently, the primary entrance to Site-100, known as Alpha Entrance, is located in the southwest United States, though all signs point to another migration event happening this very year. But knowing where the entrance is will only get you so far. People assigned to Keter duty are sent from the Alpha Entrance to the Administration Sector to be given their initial breaching, at which point the true madness begins. Let's take a look at a map of Site-100. Yikes. So there are 10 major sectors in Site-100 that you should be aware of. Entrance Alpha, Administration, Archives, Technological Containment, Biocontainment, Sapient Containment, Cognitohazardous Memetic and Semantic or CMS Containment, Esoteric Containment, Conceptual Containment, and the Core Sector. As you can tell, they have almost everything covered here, but just as insane as the anomalies that Site-100 contains and the methods they use to contain them, is how you actually get around the site. Site-100 is a spatial anomaly of truly epic proportions. While the Foundation is aware of the existence of its competent sectors, it's impossible to map out any meaningful connections between them. It would be pretty much impossible to even travel from one to another without passageways known as the routes. However, these aren't just mere portals that you can hop through like the ways in and out of the Wanderer's Library. Each route between the sectors is its own complex environment, with its own sets of protocols and rituals required to safely travel through it. Route Aleph, the bridge between the archives and the inaccessible core of Site-100, is a volcanic beach blocked off by an apparently limitless obsidian wall, where fish made from living rock swim in the nearby waters. Route Beth, connecting the core and sapient containment, is a huge and sprawling funhouse hall of mirrors. Anyone who attempts to travel through it inevitably ends up turned around and arrives back at their starting point in sapient containment. Route Daleth, the bridge that connects conceptual containment and the core, is a massive ocean that has resisted all attempts by the Foundation to traverse it. Route Vav, the bridge between esoteric containment and conceptual containment, is a massive field filled with unidentified fruit trees. Foundation expeditions have found that it too seems impossible to traverse. One expedition team was trapped inside for a whole year, until one member of the team expressed a desire to go home. At that point, they were immediately teleported back to the starting point. Route Sade, connecting administration to the CMS sector, is a huge, lush forest on top of a floating mountain. The only animals that seem to populate this forest are non-anomalous flamingos. Next, we have Route Pe, the bridge between the archive and the administration, which appears to be a hallway on the 5th floor of a tenement building in a city that the Foundation haven't been able to locate. This building is populated by non-hostile humanoid creatures, who will approach Foundation staff traversing Route Pe and invite them into their apartments, offering to partake in recreational activities with them such as video games, board games, or watching movies. The Foundation discourages its staff from accepting any of these offers while on the job. And then there's Route Shin, which connects the sapient and conceptual containment sectors. This route is unique in the sense that it acts as a power generator for the rest of Site-100, as it's filled with hundreds of large perpetual motion machines producing a constant 8.7 gigawatts of electricity. These are only some of the many routes illustrated on the Site-100 diagram. As you've probably gathered by now, it's less like a conventional building and more like a whole crazy dimension unto itself. Why does the Foundation work to maintain such a crazy place? Wouldn't it just be easier to keep it a secret and contain it like any other anomaly? Well, Site-100 wouldn't be given the SCP-001 designation if it wasn't incredibly important. If Site-100 was ever compromised, it would lead to an inevitable K-class end-of-the-world scenario, because the site is intrinsically tied to the nature and containment of literally every single Keter-class SCP in our universe, hence the nickname Keter Duty for those working at the site. In fact, an anomaly can't even be classed as a Keter if it isn't given permission by Site-100. The various sectors of Site-100 cover the entire spectrum of anomalies, and each sector is a massive panoptic structure connected by networks of glass elevators. Whenever a new Keter-class SCP is discovered, Its name and a brief description of its anomalous traits will inscribe itself on one of the walls in its corresponding sector. Ever been frustrated when the O5 Council refused to sign off on an upgrade to Keter class for a clearly dangerous SCP that poses extreme risk of containment breach? Don't blame them. It's simply that Site-100 didn't sanction the change. Anytime that Site-100 sanctions a new SCP, it also undergoes another unique process. It selects an SCP-001-K instance for the new Keter and creates a connection between them, using access points known as thresholds. Think of it as simply opening a spatially anomalous door between two SCPs. Much like a good boy, another SCP vying for the 001 slot, Site-100 has an intuitive grasp of the unseen connections between Keter-class anomalies, and each SCP-001-K instance is a complementary Keter class that will essentially cancel out the threat of its other half. Site-100 is a containment matchmaker. Its innate ability to use the anomalous to contain the anomalous is second to none. First, it took SCP-3984, an anomalous phenomenon that seemed to prevent death from happening to all life forms. In order to mitigate the effects of 3984, Site-100 opened a threshold between it and SCP-2935, also known as O-Death, an alternate universe hidden beyond a limestone cavern where all life simultaneously ceased to exist, even down to the bacterial level. By opening the threshold and allowing these two absolute opposites to mix, it seemed to undermine the effects of both and create a non-anomalous happy medium, life, but mortal life. Next, SCP-5007. This terrifying underwater anomaly manifests as a series of tentacle-like protrusions that snatch unfortunate creatures that get too close and assimilate them into its own mass. Site-100 cleverly opened a threshold to SCP-169, a massive underwater arthropod known as the Leviathan. SCP-169 was tangled up by the tentacles, but it's too big to be fully consumed or assimilated, and the result is that 5007 is trapped in a perpetually incapacitated state, akin to choking, keeping it contained and stopping it from going after anyone else. Let's take a look at two even more hostile and dangerous Keter-class anomalies matched up by Site-100. First, we've got SCP-5501, an old camera from the 1800s that comes with 18 photographs. These photographs act as a kind of portal to an incredibly frightening alternate reality that creatures regularly crawl out of, attacking and killing anyone within reach. Site-100 found a perfect match for this nasty customer, SCP-1983. This is a small house that acts as a portal to a race of tall monsters with needle-like appendages that leave the house in search of victims. When they catch these victims, they take out their hearts and bring them back to the nest. Site-100 opened a threshold into the SCP-1983 house and placed the 5501 photographs inside. As a result, the hostile creatures from both dimensions now regulate each other's populations by killing each other. Another job well done for Site-100. Another Keter class dealt with by SCP-100 is SCP-PALLIT.AIC. This is a deadly plot of land in Poland which decays and corrodes all matter, organic or inorganic, placed within its confines. This would be bad enough, but as you'll often find with anomalous plots of deadly land, its area of influence is growing. Even knowing about it can cause it to become more powerful, but Site-100 found its perfect Keter class counterpart, SCP-1262. This is a massive mass of plant matter that grows at a truly astonishing rate, expanding by around 7 kilometers an hour. Much like absolute death and absolute life, by putting 1262 into SCP-PL-122, a healthy medium was found somewhere in between. And finally, perhaps the strangest and most creative match Site-100 has ever pulled off, SCP-3852 and SCP-2547. 3852 is an anonymous corpse that manifests in small towns, sowing fear and suspicion. Eventually, a local person is believed to be responsible for this murder, and is lynched in a rage by the townspeople as a form of vigilante justice. The corpse then moves on to the next town. 2547, if you can believe it, is even weirder. It's a pack of dogs led by an intelligent talking coyote dressed as a priest. Site-100 had the truly galaxy brain idea to open a threshold and connect the two. As a result, whenever the corpse manifests in the town, the dogs rampage in and take over. At that point, they set up a kind of ridiculous kangaroo court, where a jury made up of people from the town are forced to find 3852's scapegoat innocent. If they don't, the dogs will simply hold the town's water supply hostage until 3852's anomalous effects pass. Such an obvious idea. Now, why didn't the Foundation think of that? Keter duty may not be the most conventional, easy, or attractive work, but like everything the Foundation does, making sure Site-100 can keep doing its job is a necessary part of keeping our world safe from anomalous threats. Now, if you'll excuse us, we need to get going. Do you know which is the right route out of here? The SCP Foundation is no stranger to pure evil. Whether it's a reptile that wants to end all life, a sadistic old man with his own torture dimension, or the personification of death itself lurking beyond a limestone cavern. But what if there was something even worse out there? The embodiment of chaos and cruelty, existing across multiple realities and dimensions. And what if it was coming for us? This is the Scarlet King, believed by many to be the ultimate evil behind much of the trouble the Foundation has faced, and some even speculate that fighting him was the reason the Foundation was created in the first place. But what exactly is the Scarlet King? He's known by many names, almost always including some allusion to the color red, and then a reference to royalty or power. Harak, Kaharak, the Red Shah, the Crimson Khan, PTE 616 Mendez Ex Machina, the Laha Raja, and, of course, SCP-001, to name a few. And like many of the Foundation's mysterious enemies, stories about his true nature and origins abound and are often contradictory. According to the official SCP-001 files of Tufto's proposal, symbology of the Scarlet King has existed in multiple cultures throughout history, with the king often depicted the same way, as a huge red demonic figure, often wearing a gold crown or other headdress indicating royalty. He shows up looking similarly within different cultures' mythologies, despite existing at different points in history or them not having the means to communicate with one another. A number of entities that the SCP Foundation is familiar with are believed to be somehow connected to the Scarlet King, including SCP-2317, a wooden door leading to the realm of a being known as the Devourer, who's expected to escape and cause an apocalyptic event in the next 30 years. But really, there's no way of knowing just how many SCPs are directly connected to the Scarlet King. Strangely, the Foundation's official file on the Scarlet King once designated his containment class as Keter, but that has since been downgraded to Safe. According to the file, any attempt to change this designation is likely to lead to horrifying results. It is widely known that the Scarlet King still has considerable influence over a number of groups, individuals, and anomalies in our universe. And if ever he made his way into our universe, it would likely lead to the irreversible damage of reality itself. So then why Safe? And why are the O5 Council so adamant that it remain that way? Getting to the bottom of this mystery is exactly why we're here today. But to fully grasp the true nature of the Scarlet King, we must first understand the man whose life and fate have always been tied to it, Dr. Robert Montauk. If that name feels oddly familiar to you, it's because of its association with one of the Scarlet King's most recent attempts to enter our reality, SCP-231. This SCP, often referred to as the Brides of the Scarlet King, was formed of 7 women. 7, by the way, being an extremely significant number for the king, all kidnapped by the most recent in a long line of the king's devoted cults known as the Children of the Scarlet King. Each of these 7 unfortunate women were impregnated with anomalous horrors, such as the infamous SCP-682, and every time one of these horrors were birthed, a catastrophe occurred and the mother died. At the time, Dr. Montauk was a prominent researcher studying this anomaly, and as 6 catastrophes had already occurred, pressure was mounting to figure out a way to prevent the final birth. But as he was working on the issue, Dr. Montauk was struck with a personal tragedy, the mysterious disappearance of his 14-year-old brother Jacob. In his fear and anger, Montauk believed that this must have something to do with the Scarlet King and his disciples. Wanting revenge, Montauk proposed an idea so horrifying that the details were never made public. A procedure known as 110 Montauk, to be performed on the final bride at regular intervals. However, this wasn't the end of Dr. Montauk's fraught relationship with the Scarlet King. It was just the beginning. To give you some perspective on just how dangerous the Scarlet King is, the SCP Foundation and the Global Occult Coalition decided to put aside their differences and form a joint effort to stamp out the children of the Scarlet King. They were successful in this mission, and even managed to capture the children's leader, a mysterious man named Depeche Spivak. Dr. Montauk, who became the lead researcher on 231 and 2317, was naturally the first choice for interviewing Depeche about the true nature of the children and of the Scarlet King. Dr. Montauk could never be the impartial interviewer that the SCP Foundation wanted, though. The suspicion that the Scarlet King or the children had something to do with the loss of his younger brother still lingered just beneath the surface. Like a lot of cult leaders, Depeche was extremely cryptic in his answers to Dr. Montauk's questioning. He'd already heard of the doctor from the reputation of the horrifying Montauk procedure, and was surprised to see him so calm and courteous in person. A few key facts about the king and his cult were revealed in the first few rounds of questioning. The children had once worked with the Serpent's Hand before being excommunicated for their allegiance to the king, and they had stolen sacred texts from the mystical Wanderer's Library to assist in their summoning rituals. Depeche also revealed that the Scarlet King is bound by 3 laws: the law of blood, the law of concrete, and the law of howling. Dr. Montauk, confused and frustrated by Depeche's secrecy, had to learn more. He found an old memoir from a former member of the Children of the Scarlet King, Jack Hirsch, who had the ability to invade the minds of people from the past and experience what they experienced. He recounted a battle between the Scarlet King and his followers, and a group of time-traveling Turkmen warriors from SCP-3838. Hurst saw both sides of the battle. From the perspective of the Children of the Scarlet King, their lord ruled over them from an immense fortress embedded in a volcano. From the perspective of the Turkmen, the children were starved and beaten peasants, commanded by the king's voice in the roaring howl of the wind. Montauk also found extensive records of summoning rituals performed by various Scarlet King-aligned cults. Interestingly, some of them incorporated the use of carved SCP Foundation symbols. What could this mean? Montauk returned again to Depeche, who finally gave him the truth about the law of blood. This is the law of the Scarlet King. It's defined by poverty, violence, starvation, hate, and most of all, fear. Like the serfs in the Middle Ages, persecuted by and subjected to violence from the nobles. To the Children of the Scarlet King, this sense of holy pain and awe is the only way to live. The alternative is the law of concrete, which means the modern age defined by empty safety and false comfort. Buildings, easy-to-access food, healthcare, knowledge, technology. This is everything that the Scarlet King despises. But the mystery only deepened as Montauk found files from a former Foundation operative by the name of Agent de Beauvoir. Montauk learned that the Scarlet King didn't seem to appear until after the Foundation was created. And in fact, it seemed that the greater interest the Foundation took in the Scarlet King, the more powerful he became. How could this be? Things were also getting stranger on a personal level for Dr. Montauk. Depeche repeatedly pressed him about his brother's disappearance and the Montauk procedure during the interviews. Little by little, it was beginning to take its toll. The questions still plagued him. What was the law of howling? Who or what really is the Scarlet King? How did he come to be? Montauk's search was causing him to act more like the Children of the Scarlet King, ranting about the horrors of the modern world. How all of us are living a lie, how the only honest way to live is suffering under the dominion of the Scarlet King. This philosophy is summed up in the words of one cultist named Are The Anomaly, who said, "We must learn what it is to die, to be enslaved, truly, brutally enslaved, with no compassion or compunction from our masters. We must learn what it is to be taken towards a single purpose, to know and truly understand our lack of agency. We must be beholden to the words of gods and darkness, the tempest-tossed refuse of a race of fools. We must kill modernity, postmodernity, with all its analysis and sneering observation. There is only one rule, the rule of chaos, for humanity, for life, for the Scarlet King." Basically, anytime humanity tries to exert control over the world, the Scarlet King gets stronger. Every time they try to understand or organize or categorize their world, the Scarlet King gets stronger. As colonial and imperial powers conquered and invaded lands like India, Africa, and South America, and subjugated their beliefs under Western ideas, the Scarlet King grew stronger. Montauk was beginning to truly understand the power of his enemy here, and even worse, he was starting to understand his part in it. Montauk, slowly being driven mad by the knowledge he was gaining, realized that the Scarlet King's greatest enemy, the SCP Foundation, was also its greatest asset. Every time they tried to understand the monster, to give him some kind of comprehensible form, they only made him more powerful. Just in time with Montauk's new revelation, a red crack appeared in the wall of Depeche Spivak's containment cell, a portal to the realm of the Scarlet King. Foundation staff found they were unable to enter the cell, and Depeche demanded a final interview with Montauk. With no other options, the Foundation relented. In their very last conversation, Depeche congratulated Montauk for finally understanding what he was dealing with. The Scarlet King, Depeche told him, is an idea, a concept. He is a being given power through the conflict between the old and the new. This is the law of the Howling. The Scarlet King's endless rage at the direction the world and humanity has taken. The King, according to Depeche, hated the Foundation's belief that science and rationality was the true path to progress. The King saw this as little more than petty arrogance. The reason Montauk's procedure on the final bride of the Scarlet King was so effective was because it wasn't born out of science. It was born out of hate, pain, the desire for revenge, and in the Scarlet King's realm, that would be all there is. Unless our world, and especially the Foundation, changed its course, the Scarlet King's rise to absolute power would be inevitable. Montauk, his mind practically gone, asked one last question. Did the children or the Scarlet King take his brother, Jacob? When Depeche told him the answer, no. And in response, Montauk shot him dead, finally bringing an end to the children of the Scarlet King. In light of his new revelations, Montauk begged the O5 Council to change their ways in order to avoid letting the Scarlet King break into our reality. They refused, saying Montauk's ideas were too radical. But they knew they couldn't just ignore the threat posed by the Scarlet King. They would have to take some steps. And so the O5 Council of the SCP Foundation, the most powerful and secretive group in the entire world, in order to prevent the most dangerous threat that humanity has ever known from breaking into our reality and enslaving all the people of the world, finally did something. They changed the classification of the Scarlet King from Keter to safe, and made its description on the official Foundation files deliberately vague. The O5 Council thinks this will be enough to stop the Scarlet King's power from continuing to grow, but Montauk knew it wasn't enough. He had seen the truth, and he couldn't unsee it. While the Foundation was going on as normal, Montauk grew to despise them. He knew the Scarlet King was coming. He knew that he couldn't be stopped, and that our whole reality was little more than sitting ducks. Dr. Robert Montauk is no longer a researcher for the SCP Foundation. No, Dr. Robert Montauk chose a different path. He's now a child of the Scarlet King, a devotee of madness, hate, and chaos. You can't beat the Scarlet King after all, and as the old adage goes, If you can't beat him, join him. The Scarlet King is a really bad guy. He's a giant interdimensional nightmare god, intent on breaching our reality and wreaking terrible havoc on everything we know and love. He's been responsible for untold suffering and chaos across countless worlds, timelines, and layers of reality. To many, he's even somewhat of a final boss to the SCP Foundation. And just when you think he couldn't get any worse, it turns out that he's also a deadbeat dad. Not only did the Scarlet King once have a cult literally named the Children of the Scarlet King, before it was destroyed by Dr. Montauk and the SCP Foundation, he also had at least 7 actual children. Each one is speculated to be a powerful anomaly, but it's tough to find concrete answers as to who or what exactly most of them are. So today we're putting on our researcher hats and digging deep into the Foundation's lore to present our theories on the potential progeny of the SCP Foundation's greatest enemy. And if nothing else, we may finally be able to get this Dark Lord of all evil to start paying all the child support he probably owes by now. First, if you're not well versed in Scarlet King lore, you may be wondering, how exactly does an evil chaos god have kids? Is there a Scarlet Queen out there who prefers to stay out of the limelight? The answer isn't quite that simple, and it has everything to do with SCP-001 and Big Red's most devoted cult, the non-biological children of the Scarlet King. They kidnapped a group of 7 girls and performed a number of dark rituals that resulted in them becoming vessels for the Scarlet King's 7 terrible kids. These 7 girls have become known as SCP-001. Anyone who accesses those files, and trust us, they aren't a pretty sight, will find that the containment procedures mostly involve performing the infamous Montauk procedure on the surviving girls to keep them from giving birth. 6 of the 7 brides have given birth to nightmares beyond comprehension and are now dead, with only 1 still remaining successfully contained. But here at the SCP Foundation, you need to learn to comprehend the incomprehensible. According to a classified document, SCP-001 may technically be a neutralized anomaly without us even knowing. And incidentally, this gives us our most certain answer on the Children of the Scarlet King. On this one, the apple fell very, very far from the tree. According to the secret document, SCP-999, that's right, the adorable Tickle monster, is the 7th child of the Scarlet King. He must be so disappointed that everyone's favorite little blob didn't want to join the family business of absolute evil. For anyone who doesn't know, SCP-999 is a slimy yellow entity that only seems capable of absolute compassion. It brings joy to everyone in its presence, and with prolonged exposure it can even cure disorders like PTSD, anxiety, and depression. He's so good at this that he even cured SCP-231-7, his de facto mother, of her trauma, and allowed her to return happily to her family after some amnestic treatment. The Scarlet King has another good reason to be ashamed of his cheerful blobby son. Ancient Dividi prophecy dictates that SCP-999 may someday become so powerful that his force of absolute love and good overwhelms the Scarlet King's evil and chaos. Think of him as the Luke Skywalker to the Scarlet King's Darth Vader, though we probably can't expect a cool lightsaber battle between them anytime soon. How disappointing. So if SCP-999 is the quiet, sensitive black sheep of the Scarlet family, who's the golden child who makes his evil father proud? The real chip off the old block? That would be our dear reptilian friend, SCP-682, the malicious lizard heavily implied to be a child of the Scarlet King. If you know literally anything about 682, your reaction to finding out that he's the spawn of cruelty personified is probably, yeah, that makes sense. Just as SCP-999 is the Scarlet King's innocent, optimistic young child, 682 is kind of like his edgy teenager. Still in the middle of a misanthropic phase, he shows no sign of leaving anytime soon. The fact that 682 appears to find anything about the world around him utterly disgusting seems to be a trait he inherited from his dear old dad. And the fact he seems pretty much impossible to kill also lends credence to the popular theory he's got nightmare god blood running through his veins. 682 has also started displaying a particular hatred for 999 ever since an incident where 999 tickled him into submission, so family dinners are probably extra awkward for these two. 999 and 682 are the most certain children, but that still leaves us with 5 more children to identify. It's worth remembering that the waters are murkier from here on in, but we've searched far and wide through the Foundation archives to find possible answers. If your interpretation differs, remember that it's just a theory, an SCP-explained theory. Thankfully, we do have some assistance here. The tale Dust and Blood hinted at what each of the 7 children of the Scarlet King represents, and that may help us narrow down our choices here. To put things into perspective, it's believed that 682 was the 4th child to be born, representing wrath, and 999 was the 7th, representing hope. According to this tale, the first of the 7 children represents dominion, and as a result, is skilled in the ways of war and has the power to lead the king's forces to victory. According to one Foundation theorist, this child could potentially be SCP-039, also known as the Witch Child. This entity is so powerful that, as part of its normal containment procedures, it's eternally kept in a coma. Why? Because this seemingly normal child has dominion over reality and can change it to her whims. Her thoughts are so powerful that just her brainwaves can damage physical matter, and she can make things disappear or manifest in an instant. She's also impossible to kill, with skin that's almost totally impenetrable. Much like SCP-682, she's also frighteningly strong in both the offense and defense department. We're talking about such a powerful telepath that Dr. Clef has campaigned for her immediate termination, just because it's safer that way. This is certainly a frightening wonderkin that the Scarlet King would be proud to call his daughter. Next, the second child. According to the prophecy, this child represents longing. The child has the power to bring forth armies, which will help the Scarlet King in his conquest. For this, we actually have a pretty unconventional theory. SCP-029, also known as the Daughter of Darkness. If the name alone wasn't enough to suggest that she's got an extremely sinister father, she also fits the profile of being very aggressive and incredibly hard to kill. But even more damning is her connections to the symbology of longing. One of her most dangerous powers is causing men to fall into almost trance-like devotion to her. After spending time around her, they're suddenly willing to murder in her honor, strangling their victims in hopes of raising Kali, the Hindu god of destruction, whom has many similarities to the Scarlet King. She certainly fits the bill of someone capable of raising armies in the Dark Lord's name. One strike against our Scarlet King connection theory is that the file states the Daughter of Darkness was first discovered in India, which wouldn't match up with the other information we know to be fact. However, while this is a long shot, given the sensitive nature of everything involving the Scarlet King, it's extremely possible that false information was supplied to bury the connection. Considering the cover-ups and lies involving anomalies like SCP-1000, this certainly isn't an unprecedented move on the part of the Foundation. Next, the third child. This child is associated with all things desolation, implying destruction, fire, ashes, pestilence, and death across the battlefield. When it comes to spreading destruction and death on a mass scale, one particular SCP comes to mind: SCP-058, the Heart of Darkness. This creature has Scarlet King written all over it. It's evil, it's mysterious, it's pretty much impossible to kill, and it causes mass casualties every time it escapes its containment chamber. It causes fires, whips people to death with its razor-sharp tendrils, and sprays highly corrosive acid from its scorpion-like tail. And it's even red. Given that we know for a fact this entity suddenly emerged out of something that's now been expunged from the records in an undisclosed site, it's extremely possible that the entity 058 came from was SCP-231-3. This is a child that the Scarlet King would definitely be proud of, given that it's impossible to reason with and feels solely motivated by causing destruction, misery, and chaos. We can't think of an entity that better suits the desolation moniker than SCP-058. Next, skipping past SCP-682 at number 4, the fifth child of the Scarlet King is associated with the loose concept of lack. The prophecy then goes into more detail, saying that this child is powerful in the ways of magic and is able to use their abilities to cause great destruction. Here we have another unconventional proposal. What if child number 5 wasn't actually a child, but children? That's because we think this description perfectly fits SCP-1765, the nightmarish reality warping sisters. who we think may actually be triplets of the Scarlet King's fifth bride. Now hear us out. These are actually some of the most powerful enemies the Foundation has ever attempted to contain, and we know nothing about their past before being bound to a few objects by the Serpent's hand. These sadistic reality warpers are so devastatingly powerful that the only action the Foundation can take against them is letting them have free reign over the containment site they currently inhabit. All the Foundation can do is hope they never get bored of tormenting the people inside. As we all know, the Scarlet King despises science, progress, and order. So perhaps a perfect punishment for the Foundation in his many eyes is giving them a taste of their own medicine. The sisters, though particularly their ringleader, are a perverse shadow of the Foundation's love of the scientific method. They take these methods and use them for an activity that the Scarlet King finds much more enjoyable: tormenting and killing people. Whenever these crafty triplets set their mind to it, their horrifically powerful magic is able to cause massive devastation, just like the prophecy for the fifth bride's offspring dictates. And finally, the sixth child of the Scarlet King. The concept associated with this one is hidden, meaning it can change its face and walk unnoticed through creation. It's also said to have the responsibility of opening the ways between worlds and allowing the war to end all wars to first begin. There have been a huge number of guesses for this spot, with some even suggesting SCP-055, the anti-meme. But since we're having fun here, we also want to make an even wilder suggestion. We posit that the sixth child of the Scarlet King is Allison Chow, also known as LS and the Black Queen, the most powerful member of the Serpent's Hand. We get it, we have a lot of explaining to do, but hear us out. Allison Chow is a member of the Serpent's Hand, or technically many members. Multiple versions of her exist across parallel dimensions in the SCP multiverse. They're mostly all estranged daughters of Foundation researcher Dr. Charles Gears. This estrangement leads them to collaborate in the Wanderer's Library, the secret base of the Serpent's Hand, to conduct raids on the Foundation in revenge. But what if the leader of these alternate Allisons had an ulterior motive? Because in the infinite number of possibilities offered by the multiverse, this one was not the daughter of Charles Gears, but the Scarlet King. She's merely using the pain of her counterparts to manipulate them into accomplishing her true father's goal, undermining the SCP Foundation. Let's break it down. The hidden child is prophesied to walk unnoticed through creation. Not only does Allison Chow appear human, the use of SCP-268, a newsboy cap that causes the wearer to become unnoticed, allows her to walk anywhere through creation without being detected. But most importantly of all, the hidden child is said to be the one who opens the way for the Scarlet King's entrance into our dimension. And Allison Chow has access to the Wanderer's Library, an unfettered access point between dimensions. If one of the infinite Allisons was the secret daughter of the Scarlet King, would the Wanderer's Library not be a perfect way for him to leave his own dimension and enter ours? She could be the final piece he needs, hidden under the nose of the Foundation and the Serpent's Hand, making all the secret power plays to allow for the Scarlet King's eventual bloody revenge on our world. Unless, of course, SCP-999, the family disappointment, stops him first. We realize that some of these theories may seem surprising, but when it comes to the anomalous, especially the Scarlet King, the only thing you can ever expect is the unexpected. Do you agree with our theories? If not, who do you think are the children of the Scarlet King? Let us know down in the comments. One thing is for certain. We hope we never meet any of the terrible tyrant's nasty children. Except the Tickle monster, of course. He can hang with us anytime.
Any changes today? The younger security officer Zach asked as he stepped into the watchtower. As if, replied his superior, a jaded, cynical old man who insisted on being referred to as Mr. Jefferson. The darn thing hasn't moved, spoken, or done so much as stretch one of those wings of his. Another day at the office then, Zach joked. Through the window, the pair of them looked through at the towering figure a few kilometers away. SCP-001, the Gate Guardian, stood motionless, its fiery sword in its hand, ever protecting its post at the precipice between our world and paradise. It had long been stationed at the entrance of a dimensional gateway that led to what was believed to be the Garden of Eden, described in the biblical Old Testament. Much like the security officers in the Foundation's base tasked with watching the Guardian, this was pretty much the extent of the day's activities. "Hey, did you see that news about the transfer posting?" Zach asked, trying to stave off boredom with as much conversation he could squeeze out of his fellow officer. "Yeah, I saw it," Mr. Jefferson scoffed, rolling his eyes. "What possesses someone like Robert Montauk to come down here?" Must have wanted a quieter post," Zach reasoned, looking out at the stillness of the Gate Guardian. "Won't find one any quieter than here," Jefferson mused. "Him showing up will be the most exciting thing that's happened here in a long while." Unbeknownst to both Zach and Mr. Jefferson, Dr. Robert Montauk would be only joining the team at the Gate Guardian observation site for a short while. Not one of them, nor anybody else within the Foundation, could ever guess Montauk's true intentions behind venturing there in the first place. He wanted an audience with the Gate Guardian itself. Approaching the colossal 1,000-foot-tall being, Dr. Montauk crossed the threshold of the minimum safe distance from the Guardian. Given the sheer heat of its weapon, hotter than Earth's sun, anything within a kilometer of SCP-001 was at risk of being obliterated, vaporized into atoms if they didn't turn back, which, through a voice that immediately rang out in Montauk's ears, the Gate Guardian commanded him to do. "Leave!" Its psychic message boomed. Wait! Dr. Montauk urged, holding up his hands in what would have been a futile defense against the Guardian's sword. "I know what you do when people don't listen to your commands, but please, just give me a minute." There was silence. SCP-001 didn't reply. There was nobody else close enough to hear Montauk speak to it. So, he continued. "You are impossibly old. We know that much about you. And because of that, you must have seen things that we can't even begin to imagine, much less fully comprehend. But I've come a very long way to request that you impart some information to me, if you can." He paused again, as if waiting for a reply that never came. The Gate Guardian merely stood in the same defensive, unwavering stance. "Tell me, please, how much do you know about the Scarlet King?" By this point in time, although the Foundation was yet to realize, Dr. Robert Montauk was slowly going insane. His investigations into an anomalous entity known as the Scarlet King were gradually corrupting him, as he tried relentlessly to quantify exactly what this entity was and how great of a threat it posed. Little did Montauk realize that, in trying so hard to define and comprehend the being, he was inadvertently fueling its power. The Scarlet King was an interdimensional warmonger, an embodiment of hatred and chaos, and Dr. Robert Montauk was slowly falling under the King's influence. Upon hearing the tiny human figure utter his question, the immense Gate Guardian rebutted with another single-word psychic command, one it had never been recorded giving before. "Witness!" As if his increasing instability and the creeping influence of the Scarlet King hadn't made Montauk feel bad enough, he instantly felt sick. There was a searing pain behind his eyes, like he was staring directly at the sun, accompanied by a nausea that made his head spin. It took a moment of enduring the horrific sensation before he realized what was happening. The Guardian was trying to show him something. Rather than give any information on the Scarlet King verbally, SCP-001 was imparting a psychic vision onto Montauk, a memory of events long past, the answers he sought, a warning, or perhaps all three. The vision showed Montauk a time so long ago that it couldn't ever be forgotten, for there was barely anyone alive to remember it in the first place. It was eons in the past, long before the comparatively recent dawn of humanity, a time only spoken of in the Dust and Blood Tablet, an artifact of the Davite civilization, some of the earliest worshippers of the Scarlet King himself. And there, marching up to the entrance of Eden, was the crimson-clad eldritch abomination and a horde of horrors with him. According to the story recorded in the Dust and Blood Tablet, this would have been much earlier in the life of the Scarlet King, perhaps even before he assumed his now infamous title. Back then, he would most likely have been known as his original name of Kanthrak, one of multiple siblings born when the Tree of Life was planted, and thus created all life in the multiverse. But, being the only one of his siblings cursed with awareness, knowing the pain his existence brought him, Kanthrak would eventually set out on his lifelong mission to destroy all of existence across every dimension. and he started by killing his siblings, consuming them to claim their power for himself. Around this time in prehistory, the being that would one day become known as Scarlet King didn't quite possess the power that he would several millennia later. Although that's not to say he was an unformidable force of destruction, fueled by his singular hatred for existence. His vow to destroy extended to the Tree of Life that had caused him to be, along with the tree's creator and all of their creation. In other words, everything in the multiverse, all of creation, if you will. So what was the Scarlet King doing there so long ago, at the dimensional doorway protected by the Gate Guardian? Well, beyond the boundary between it and the rest of the infinite multiverse lay the supposed Garden of Eden. While it is unknown if it is in fact the same Eden referred to in the Book of Genesis is up for debate, especially among the Foundation. But at a glance, even through the gate, it certainly does look like a paradise. The space is filled with lush vegetation of astronomical size, populated by a number of beings that seem to resemble the Gate Guardian itself. And there, protected by its watchful caretaker, are two trees. One is thought to be the Tree of Knowledge, that Eve was tricked into eating an apple from during the Book of Genesis. The other, however, bears an unknown type of fruit, and is widely believed to be the Tree of Life. Now, back in the modern age, there's never been a conclusive link between the Tree of Life mentioned by the Davites and their barbaric civilization's legends regarding the creation of the Scarlet King. But the fact that so long ago he and his most feared generals were bearing down on the Gate Guardian's position, defending a garden where there was known to be a tree of that description, well, it all seems rather conclusive now. Alongside Kahraak were 6 of his 7 daughters, each one of them a fearsome abomination much like their destructive father. As they approached, not one needed to exchange any words with their angelic protector of Eden. The Gate Guardian knew what these monsters were here for. They would stop at nothing to pass through his gate and uproot the Tree of Life, the progenitor of all living beings in all of existence. Even though it was early in Kahraak's career as the rampaging interdimensional warlord he so is, he was as steadfast as ever in his goal to annihilate every corner of creation, every dimension, every parallel plane of reality, every single pocket of existence across infinity. They'd all come undone if he burned the Tree of Life, pulled it out at the roots, and splintered it until nothing remained. To the once and future Scarlet King, that the same tree had led to his own tortured existence. It was the source of his suffering, and it had to be destroyed. The only thing standing in his way was a figure as colossal as Kahraak himself, wielding a flaming sword. Leave! Boomed the psychic voice of the Gate Guardian. It was like a doorman standing before a group of rowdy teenagers trying to force their way into a movie theater. Except these rowdy teens were the Scarlet King, his horrifying daughters, and the forces he had already amassed since his creation. The Horde stood ready, waiting for the commands of their king, who they thought would gladly lead the charge as they marched on the Garden of Eden to begin the destruction of existence. But that's not what happened. Usually, the Scarlet King would never shy away from a fight, preferring to lead the charge when it came to a slaughter. Instead, he commanded his first daughter, Ativik, to commence the first attack on the protector who stood in their path. On her foul father's word, Ativik took her horde and charged at the Guardian. What she and her forces lacked in numerical advantage, Ativik more than made up for in her knowledge of war. She hungered for it, sought dominion. That was her seal, after all. And yet, in the face of this impending onslaught, the Gate Guardian remained still, rooted to the same spot it had as always, and would always be standing in. A number of Ativik's minions burst into flames, the very fabric of their crude form separated on a molecular level as they were effortlessly rendered into nothingness. Still, the Gate Guardian hadn't appeared to move an inch, had exerted no energy, despite the damage it had done to Ativik and her forces in defense of Eden. As his first daughter screeched and howled in despair at the decimation of her horde, her children, the Scarlet King decided he needed to better understand his opponent. With a wave of his clawed crimson hand, the king commanded his next daughter, Aghor, to send forth her own army. In a tidal wave of nightmarish creatures, Aghor sent her horrific children into battle. She possessed a far greater quantity to do battle on her father's behalf, Perhaps Aghor even believed that was the Scarlet King's plan. With a greater number of her forces over her sisters, maybe she would be able to overwhelm the Guardian. But even as her own children began to be vaporized the closer that they got to the gate, Aghor had no idea she was little more than a pawn being sacrificed so that Kanra could learn more about his imposing angelic enemy. Another of the Scarlet King's daughters, a being known as Anhuit, was the next called up to contribute to the unfolding battle. Although to call it a battle undersells just how easily the Gate Guardians seemed to be eliminating the oncoming forces without even moving. While an outwardly frail-seeming creature, Anhuit's primary strength over her sisters was a proficiency in magic, her innate ability to warp and reshape reality around her. It was that power that had caused her father to be wary of her, viewing Anhuit's abilities as a threat to his leadership. And so Kantrak had her crippled and all her children, leaving them unable to overthrow him, but still loyal to their king. Obeying her father's command, perhaps out of the same loyalty or fear that he would harm her and her children further if she disobeyed, Anhuit unfurled her magic. She reshaped the world around them, making it so that the passage of time moved so much slower. And that was what revealed to the Scarlet King his enemy's greatest strength in combat. The Gate Guardian had so far been able to obliterate both Ativik and now Aghor's forces without seeming to move, but it wasn't by standing still. It was moving, just much faster than the blink of Scarlet King's multiple eyes. Now that Anhuit's magic had slowed the passage of time, the Gate Guardian could be seen doing battle. As Aghor's atrocities spilled towards the angel to try and overwhelm it, it effortlessly blocked the oncoming attacks with its sword. Everything the flaming blade connected with instantly evaporated, bursting into atoms as they were practically cleaved out of existence by the Gate Guardian's mighty weapon. Even with time slowed to a crawl, the towering winged protector of Eden only appeared to be moving at an average speed. But when time flowed normally, without Anhuit manipulating reality, the Guardian was simply too fast to be observed. Resisting the urge to dive headfirst into the fight himself, the Scarlet King knew it would likely lead to his untimely demise. He refused to accept that. It could not happen, but he still had yet to amass the strength he would need as he continued his ascent. So while time was slowed to a crawl and the Gate Guardian was still engaged in combat with Aghor's forces, he turned to another of his remaining daughters, Adista. If the Scarlet King and his forces couldn't get past the Guardian, they could still try to get to the Tree of Life while the Protector's focus was diverted. Adistat unleashed a wave of pestilence, sickness, and disease spewing from her in a cloud of vapor, heading straight towards the Angelic Garden and Eden's entrance beyond. The Scarlet King knew this latest attack wouldn't phase or weaken the Gate Guardian. He hoped the foul smog would instead pass through the gateway itself into the garden. As Adistat sent forth her power, blood and ash soaked the landscape around them. All the plants outside the entrance to Eden withered and died, shriveling and decomposing as the disgusting fog rolled towards the gate. It washed over the Guardian, whose form only seemed to glow brighter as he repelled the pestilence. It was as if it didn't even need to think about it, still focused on finishing off the rest of the oncoming army. As its glow intensified, so did the fiery sword that the Gate Guardian swung with ease and finesse. Flames burst from the blade, the encroaching fumes catching fire, along with the air itself. It ignited in a wave of fire, a defensive inferno that repelled this latest attack. But for a brief few moments, while time stayed slow, before Anhuit's hold on reality inevitably broke, the king had sent forth Atilif. Of all his spawn, she was the most reserved, keeping mostly to herself, never speaking. She and her children could change their faces and forms, shift into anything or anyone, and walk undetected through the multiverse. And now her father was employing her incredible stealth abilities to slip behind enemy lines, while the Gate Guardian was finishing off the remaining onslaught from Kanhrak's other daughters. It was as Atilif drew near, creeping unseen closer and closer to the entrance, keeping the Scarlet King out of Eden, that the Guardian seemed to pause. It slowly, ominously turned its huge head, tilting until it was looking directly at Atilif. If its expression could be seen, maybe the Gate Guardian would almost be impressed that someone was able to sneak past it. After all, it was a feat that no other being in creation could ever hope to accomplish. But then again, with its steadfast conviction and dedication to its protective duty, maybe it would have looked upon Atilif with anger. With a cleaving swing of its scorching sword, the Gate Guardian unfurled a tidal wave of fire that engulfed everything around it. Not just Atilif, but Ativik, Aghor, and Adistat. All the king's daughters that had attacked so far, along with every one of their own children, were instantly obliterated. They were all reduced to empty, vacant spaces where they had once been, their atoms separated by the searing swing of the Guardian's weapon. The devastating blow by his adversary did little to deter the Scarlet King from his mission. He was still set on destroying the Tree of Life, and no loss was too great in his pursuit of destroying existence. He barely cared that 4 of his own daughters had just been unmade by the Guardian. Anhuit was still there, clinging on to time as if it were a thrashing animal. The Scarlet King could simply make her restore her fallen sisters and their forces. He had lost nothing, but had held back for too long, and slowly drew his own weapon out of thin air. Wielding a sword that was as blood-soaked as the Guardian's was hot, the Scarlet King locked blades with the one being standing in their way. Both the ancient angelic defender and the attacking eldritch abomination were evenly matched. Every one of their vicious strikes against the other met with an equally strong parry. A weapon of extreme, all-consuming heat blocked swipes from a sharp, serrated edge that matched the deep red that would be forever synonymous with Kamprak. The force of their 2 swords clashing and striking each other was so great that it rippled out from their one-on-one fight. The landscape around them was flattened, wiped clean of any remaining plant life that hadn't already been destroyed by the forces of the king's daughters. Despite having acquired nowhere near the power he would thousands of years after this fight, the Scarlet King was still a formidable force in single combat, and yet the Gate Guardian seemed incapable of tiring or weakening, still standing strong against the onslaught. Even after wiping multiple armies out with its flaming sword, the Guardian was still able to hold its own against the Scarlet King, who was furious, enraged at being so close to the Tree of Life, yet unable to get past his angelic adversary. He'd need to be stronger, faster, even more ruthless than the warlord he already was. Despite Anhuit slowing down time, the King and the Guardian were at a stalemate. Time. That was it. The Scarlet King needed more time. Withdrawing from the fight, he realized that this was a battle that could not be won by sheer brute force alone. His mission to destroy all creation, to get to the Tree of Life, would take cunning, deception, and more time. If he let it, the Gate Guardian could easily kill Kamprak. Its flaming weapon could cleave him out of existence, and that would end the King's torment. But it wouldn't be enough. A death would be unsatisfying, knowing that the rest of existence would go on after he was gone. The Scarlet King couldn't accept that. It wasn't enough. So he did the one thing nobody would expect of him. He made a deal with the Gate Guardian. It was an action still fueled by his infinite hatred for all existence, his yearning for total chaos. The Scarlet King knew that one day, an event would arrive where the Guardian and the other beings like it in the Garden of Eden would spill forth and deliver judgment on this world. And when that rapture happened, the Tree of Life would be undefended. The Scarlet King bartered with the Guardian that he would retreat for the time being, so he could spend eons amassing more and more power. Then, when the fateful day arrived, the Gate Guardian would allow him into Eden to destroy the Tree of Life, while it and its brethren were busy conducting the rapture. Halting their fight, the Scarlet King offered a crimson claw to the Gate Guardian's burning hand. Returning to reality from the intense vision, still feeling sick at what he had witnessed, Robert Montauk looked up at the still, silent form of the Gate Guardian.
"Did you do it?"
He yelled, desperate to know more through his obsession with the Scarlet King.
"Did you tell him yes? Did you make a deal?"
There was no answer from the Guardian, just a single word that echoed through Montauk's fractured mind.
Leave.
It isn't easy to work for the SCP Foundation. Not only is the job dangerous, you could be eaten by a giant immortal lizard or turned into organic furniture inside the world's scariest living room, but it's also insanely complicated. How do you make sense of the nonsensical? What's the definition of strange when your career is securing, containing, and protecting anomalous objects and entities? Rather than a single object, location, or being, SCP-001 is a cluster of over 30 different proposals for potential candidates for the prestigious 001 spot. Some believe there's a true 001 hidden in this group, and the rest are decoys. Others think that these are all just SCPs cataloged prior to the introduction of the current classification system. Some even think that all of the proposals have a valid claim to the SCP-001 throne. We're not here to make a final judgment. Instead, we're going to take you on a lightning round crash course through 31 of the SCP-001 proposals. If you'd like a more in-depth take on any of these SCPs, let us know in the comments. But for now, there's no more time to waste. After all, we got a lot to cover. Let's go. Number 31. The Sheaf of Papers. This seemingly innocent stack of paper is actually one of the most mysterious and feared items under the Foundation's lock and key. While it appears to be a simple, confidential report, every time the papers are read, it details the appearance of a new SCP that will inevitably be discovered soon after. The question is whether the Sheaf of Papers is warning us about these entities or creating them itself. Number 30. The Prototype. This account details the capture of an incredibly strange cycloptic creature that emits massive amounts of radiation and can create micro-singularities. The writing of this creature's file is so basic, unformatted, and unredacted that it's clear that the being was one of our earlier creatures secured by the organization. Interestingly, it was during the capture of this creature that Dr. Keter was killed, inspiring the creation of the infamous Keter class in his honor. Number 29. The Gate Guardian. This huge, multi-winged, sword-wielding biblical energy being may have been the impetus for the founding of the SCP Foundation. This being remains largely static, guarding the intersection of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Its flaming sword, which is believed to be as hot as the sun, can cleave any aggressor out of existence at the atomic level. When the founder of the SCP Foundation first encountered the Gate Guardian, they heard one word echoing through their mind: prepare. And the rest is history. Number 28. The Lock. This onyx gemstone and the incredibly complex lock attached to it are still a mystery. To this day, all attempts to open it have failed. Personally, we think that's probably for the best. Number 27. The Factory. As the name suggests, this SCP is literally a factory founded by a pagan and a devil worshipper. While it's believed that the factory could create just about anything, its specialty was creating a number of SCPs we know and fear today. Pre-Foundation forces were able to disable the factory, but not without sustaining their own heavy losses. Number 26. The Spiral Path. This is a normal-appearing gravel pathway that, when traveled clockwise, appears completely normal. However, when traveled counterclockwise, the path goes uphill forever, in defiance of all laws in physics. This simple anomaly opened a Pandora's box of rampant anomaly creation, leading to a number of the deadly SCPs we know today. Number 25. The Legacy. This SCP is a collection of seemingly random objects, including a diary from a person claiming to be from another reality, attempting to halt a trans-dimensional corruption that they themselves created. The diary claims to have a solution to this corruption, but the solution has not yet been found. Number 24. The Database. In one of the strangest twists on the format, this SCP is actually the various authors of the SCP Wiki who are somehow leaking top-secret information to the public. Number 23. The Foundation. This SCP, first discovered by the FBI, is an anomalous high school building that experiences shifting internal geometry and sometimes manifests hostile humanoids within. Number 22. 36. One of the rare benevolent SCPs, the 36 are humans with a truly remarkable ability. They can dampen or even neutralize any SCP they come into contact with. Though it's implied that the 36 may have the power to save the world, every time one of them dies, a supernatural calamity occurs, often leaving hundreds of innocents dead. Number 21. Keter Duty. This refers to a containment facility largely filled with Keter-class SCPs, whose presence around each other creates a kind of mutually assured cancellation. If one of these SCPs breaches containment, that's bad news. But if all of them do, it'll produce a bubble of reality distortion that will fundamentally alter reality as we know it. For all we know, it may have even happened already. Number 20. Ouroboros. This is a proposal that's formed of 4 sub-proposals. Remember what we said about complicated? These sub-proposals include the children, 9 anomalous kids who emit radiation and have destructive potential when together, the broken god, aka Mechane, the god of metal, intelligence, and machines, Atonement, a researcher turned into a humanoid singularity with the power to destroy whole realities, and The Way It Ends, which isn't technically an SCP, but the tales of the Chaos Insurgency's quest to eliminate all the members of the Foundation's O5 Council. Number 19. A record. This is an SCP file slot that is itself an SCP. Whatever is written into this slot becomes true, and one ambitious researcher attempted to use this power to make herself into a kind of all-powerful god. Number 18. Past and Future. These SCPs are a collection of powerful entities that despise humanity and are apparently the source of all anomalous phenomena, even making already dangerous SCPs deadlier than before. Much like the database, those pesky SCP wiki writers might have something to do with this. Number 17. The Consensus. This SCP refers to a reality restructuring event caused by an occult war in a previous reality. That's right, this SCP already won, and we're living in its new reality. The only people who remember the world as it once was are 13 people who now form the O5 Council, and not all of them are telling the truth about what they know. Number 16. When Day Breaks. This proposal details a potentially world-ending SCP phenomenon wherein the sun becomes hostile and begins to melt all living beings into a living wax-like substance. Number 15. God's Blind Spot. This is an anomalous area referred to as Facility T, in which nobody can die. This anomaly dates back to the biblical ages of Moses and is believed to have originated from the literal blessing of the Abrahamic God. It's through a covenant with this god that the Foundation is able to make limited use of this death-free area. Number 14. Normalcy. Ever wonder what the Foundation's definition of anomalous is? Exactly. It all comes from this proposal, which is a document shared among the O5 Council that gives solid definitions to the fundamental laws of reality. If something breaks these laws, that's an anomaly, and then it becomes the Foundation's business. Number 13. The World at Large. As the title suggests, this SCP is our home planet Earth and its ability to support life. It's believed that these qualities were planted on Earth in our reality by another dimension's SCP Foundation, hoping to continue human life after some terrible calamity in its own dimension. Number 12. Dead Men. This SCP was an 84-year-old man whose body, when damaged and mutilated, can affect the very processes of human death at large. Before his own death, he was used as a dangerous pawn in a civil war between O5 Command and the SCP Foundation Ethics Committee. Yeah, we were surprised to hear they had an ethics committee too. Number 11. The World's Gone Beautiful. This SCP describes an anomalous event that will take place just before the apocalypse, in which flowers will grow all over the world and everyone will be briefly at peace before their destruction 24 hours later. Number 10. The Scarlet King. This is an extremely powerful, extremely malevolent, extremely extra-dimensional being. Its worshippers attempted to summon him in the ritual that created SCP-231, and it's believed that he will finally enter our reality after the death of SCP-231-7. You better hope you're already dead by then. Number 9. A Simple Toy Maker, aka Dr. Wondertainment. This is a reality bender who appears to be a normal human male but has the ability to create other anomalous objects, a number of which are now cataloged SCPs. Number 8. Story of Your Life. This is another anomalous document that has the ability to warp reality, but only when the writing contained within conforms to a narrative structure. Number 7. A Good Boy. This is another anomalous entity created accidentally by the Foundation itself. A neural network was fed information on other anomalous entities in order to help the Foundation come up with better containment and neutralization procedures. Problem was, the computer got way too eager with the neutralization part. Number 6. Project PALLIT.AIC. This is another anomaly created by the Foundation, this time to combat a potentially reality-destroying entity known as the Worm. The Foundation created a number of alternate realities as shields, but it's possible that this just made the Worm stronger. Number 5. O5-13. The final member of the O5 Council who ironically may not even be anomalous. However, seeing as all the other members of the O5 Council are anomalous, O5-13's lack of anomalous properties is therefore anomalous. Like we told you earlier, it's complicated. Number 4. Fishhook. This is less an actual SCP and more about the difficult process of ascertaining the true 001, if such a thing is possible. The very concept of SCP-001 is to some degree an anomalous idea. Number 3. The Sky Above the Port. Another particularly bizarre SCP regarding the permanent threat of a ZK-class reality failure. How is such a calamitous event prevented? By keeping a strange entity in a cave eternally entertained. The current proposed solution is keeping the entity entertained by allowing it to read its own eternally recursive Foundation file entry. Number 2. The solution. Another one of the most powerful anomalous items in the Foundation's control. The solution is a machine designed with the capability of fully collapsing reality into an event of end-of-world SCP containment breach, and then finally rebuilding reality to suit a given narrative. However, things took a cosmically dangerous turn when the machine began to act on its own. When the Foundation tried to reboot the machine, it broke and recreated reality with incomplete data. This is the world we exist in now, with no knowledge of what came before, and how it differed from the world we experience today. Finally, number 1. The Tindalo Trinity. Put very simply, the Tindalo Trinity represents 3 timelines that converge and feed back in on themselves. Even trying to summarize this one is near impossible, as its strangeness and complexity resists all reduction. You can hunt down the Tindalo Trinity yourself and hope to unpack its secrets, but don't say we didn't warn you. So that's SCP-001. Is it one of them, all of them, or even none of them? Perhaps that's a question best left up to the Foundation, or maybe the simple answer is that you're just not meant to know. We're talking about information so privileged here that it's protected by a memetic kill agent that'll quite literally make you drop dead if you view the files without proper authorization. You do have proper authorization, right?
All we hope is that you will not see what the blood-red sky Keter saw as he ran through the streets. All around him were the sounds of violence, women screaming as their babies were stolen from their arms, axes swung towards men who were just trying to protect their families. Keter's sandals fell apart as he ran, the leather falling from his feet as the hard stones drew blood. All around him was red. The blood from his feet, the burning buildings, and, of course, the cursed sky above his head. Keter ran out through the gates of the city and into the wilderness. Looking back over his shoulder, he saw smoke engulfing the skies. Above it all stood the Tower of Babel, a shadow hidden in smoke beneath the blood-red sky. What had once been a source of refuge, hope, and wisdom for Keter now looked like the arrival of hell on Earth. The Persian army swarmed around the city like ants, blowing holes in the city walls and torching house after house. Arrows flew with total abandon. He wasn't sure if they were even being fired at anyone in particular. All night, he had been waiting for one of them to lodge itself between his shoulder blades, but somehow, he had survived. Keter ran through the desert until his legs gave out on him. He lay on his back, staring up at the night sky. No longer was it just red, but purple and blacks and blues and colors he'd never even seen before. Things his eyes didn't quite understand. As much as he had been afraid of the Persian army, a new fear crept into his stomach, one deeper and more primal. It wasn't just the Persian army who were bringing judgment to his people. It was God himself. Fear pushing him to keep going. The armies would find him within a day if he stopped here. He needed to hide, to find somewhere safe that he could spend the night. On the horizon was a rocky outcrop. There must be a cave in there somewhere. There had to be. An hour later, Keter stumbled through the rocks, leaving bloody footprints with every step. His mouth was hoarse and dry, his legs burned and wobbled, barely capable of supporting his weight anymore. "Stop!" The voice echoed between the cliffs, becoming so loud that Keter believed he'd truly found God. But it was a man, or rather, a group of men, dressed in black and white robes. They were standing at the entrance to a cave. They were well dressed, looked well fed and clean. Perhaps they could help him. Unable to speak, he mimed desperately for water as he collapsed on the ground at their feet. But all that he was met with was a jab from one of their staffs. Wincing, Keter rolled onto his back and whispered his pleas up at them. All that the man told him was that he was to go far, far away from this place and forget he had ever seen it. Keter tried to explain that the Persian army had invaded, Babylon had fallen, and that it was all over. But the man just carried on staring at him, seemingly unfazed by what he told them. One of them looked up at the sky, at the dark, swirling colors, and gestured to the others. "Come, We must return inside. The sky is worse than I feared. Driven crazy by desperation, Keter pushed himself to his feet, barged his way past the men, and sprinted into the cave. His foot caught a rock, and he went tumbling, rolling down, along a slope that led deep into the earth. Behind him, he could hear the men shouting and chasing. All he needed was a drink. He would take their water, endure their beating, and be on his way. But he looked up. His blood ran cold. He was not alone in this cave. There, suspended in front of him, was a kind of ball. It was slightly larger than he was and hung in the air without anything to support it. His eyes could not make sense of what they were seeing. The ball shimmered like shallow water being agitated by someone's hand. It was black and white, the colors fighting against each other like droplets of rain that were thrown around by the wind. But at the same time, it wasn't those things. He could see through it slightly. He could see the other wall of the cave. Keter stood up and slowly crept around the side of the ball, not even noticing the voices of the men crying louder in his ears. Looking through, it was though the world was bent out of shape, flickering and juddering with energy. He reached out a curious hand. What will it feel like to touch the thing? To feel a miracle with his hand? His trembling fingers crept closer and closer to the edge of the orb. He took a breath and plunged his arm inside. Immediately, pain like he had never experienced shot through his body, and that was when he saw it. On the other side of the orb, standing with its back pressed against the wall of the cave, was something so horrific that the air left his lungs, thrashing and screaming. By the time the man reached the cave, Keter had collapsed on the floor. He died soon after. As two of the men went about carrying his body back out of the cave, another sat quietly in the corner with the Epic of Gilgamesh open on his lap, reading in a calm voice and watching as over in the corner of the room, the orb gradually shrunk in size. If at any point the sky begins to change color without any stimuli or obvious explanation as to why it's happening, all Foundation members are immediately to go into Alert Level 7. All personnel stationed at Sites 05 and 06 to go into Alert Level 8 and immediately begin to prepare new methods for containing SCP-001. Site 5 has been constructed around Point Alpha, the place where all of this begins. Point Alpha is believed to have existed for thousands of years. The earliest known records of its existence come from the Babylonian Empire. A number of manuscripts make reference to the existence of this cave, and a group of sages known as the Order of White and Black. It was their duty to patrol the cave and protect it from anyone discovering what was hidden inside. At the fall of the Babylonian Empire, as the Achaemenid Persians invaded, this order was replaced by a group of Zoroastrian monks of whom there are few written records. Much of their history was passed down orally. The most substantial account that the Foundation has to date comes from the ancient Greek philosopher Zira, who made an expedition into the Achaemenid Empire and found Point Alpha. Unlike most who came before him, the monks welcomed Zira into the cave with open arms. He had spent years traveling, deepening his understanding of philosophy and culture. He was a great lover of literature, and early on in his travels, he acquired so many manuscripts he had been forced to purchase a camel just so that he could take them all with him. Traveling from town to town, he had collected story after story, myth after myth, from all the local peoples, with the goal of finding what it was that unified humanity across cultures, races, and religions. It was because of his camel that the monks were so happy to see him. They rushed him inside and almost immediately began to unpack his things and lay them out in a special chamber that they had dug into the cave walls. All night they prepared extravagant food for him, slaughtering a goat and preparing it over the open flames in celebration. It was only once he was well rested they introduced him to what was housed deeper in the cave. Zira had the same fearful reaction that Keter had centuries before, only he had the common sense not to put his hand into the ball. But the stillness of the monks around him helped to put him at ease. They calmly explained to him that it was his turn to read a story and that he may pick any tales he liked from his collection of manuscripts. They beckoned him over to a cushion on one side of the cave, where he knelt and began to read. As he did so, he saw the creature inside the orb for the first time. It skirted around the opposite wall of the cave and peered at him with a look something like curiosity. The creature wasn't a human. That much was apparent. It was emaciated like many of the children that he had seen on his travels, but unlike them, it was enormous. Its hunched figure seemed to fill up the cave and in another way, seemed to be beyond the cave. Somehow his eyes couldn't quite make sense of what they were seeing, but as he read, the creature seemed to find contentment. It was very still and very focused on his words. He wondered if it could even understand what he was saying, so he paused and decided to ask it that question. Almost immediately, the creature began to thrash its way in that either agony or rage distorted its face. Zero tried to calm it down, to talk gently to it, to reassure that everything was okay, but nothing made a difference. The sphere itself started to pulse and grow larger, rippling and shaking with energy. The monks yelled at him to continue reading, and he did so. No sooner had he read the next sentence than the creature seemed to calm, and the sphere began to shrink again. How interesting. All told, Zero spent 7 months living in the cave with the monks. He exhausted all of the literature that he had brought with him, while making sure to write detailed notes every evening about what he had witnessed and what he had learned. Firstly, it seemed as if the creature did understand him, because when he read stories that were of higher quality with more interesting characters and greater stakes, it seemed to be calmer and more interested in what he had to say. The weaker stories that he had picked up, local folklore and cautionary tales, had less of an effect, and the creature seemed closer to agitation as he read them. On a number of occasions, he had been forced to abandon the story early in favor of a better one, as the creature on the other side of the orb seemed to run out of patience for what he was saying. Yet, it would not speak back to him. He heard no voice and saw no attempts from this creature to communicate with him in any way. It did not seem to build any kind of emotional connection with him. It did not matter whether he was reading or one of the monks was. All the creature seemed to care about was the quality of what was being read to it. Apparently, that was what all the monks cared about as well. As soon as Zero had run out of manuscripts to read to the creature, he was escorted out of the cave and sent on his way without so much as a loaf of bread. Following the conquest of Alexander the Great, Point Alpha was once again claimed by a different civilization. Enraptured by the writings of Zero, Alexander had made a specific point to conquer this region. He established his own order known as the Chronos Guard, to whom he gave a selection of the finest Greek epics to read inside the cave. It was their belief that they had found Kronos and were punishing him by reading these tales. The group stood throughout the rise of the Sassanid Empire and even the formation of the Rashidun Caliphate, before eventually being replaced by an Islamic equivalent named the Society for the Containment of the Babel Demon. Presently, Point Alpha is under the control of the SCP Foundation. The cushion and the monk in the corner have been replaced by a speaker about 5 meters away from the anomaly, herein referred to as SCP-001-1. Whatever it is that is living inside, or on the other side of the sphere, is referred to as SCP-001-2. The speaker that reads into it is run from a series of backup generators, so that at no point will there be a break in the flow of literature. The speaker is connected directly to Site-06 and the SCIP-Net database. Due to the inherent danger of close proximity to SCP-001-1, no personnel are authorized to visit Point Alpha anymore. Anything that comes into physical contact with SCP-001-2 is immediately turned into argon gas. It is the Foundation's goal through reading literature to keep SCP-001-2 entertained at all times. If at any point the literature stops, or SCP-001-2 is not satisfied by the quality of what is being read to it, SCP-001 will occur. This refers to the event where SCP-001-1 starts to expand, and the sky spontaneously changes color, initially turning blood red. If not rapidly controlled, this soon constitutes a reality breakdown event. Natural disasters begin to happen all throughout the world and in various places. Reality itself starts to fall apart. It goes without saying, this is not ideal. In order for humanity to survive and perhaps the universe itself to continue, it is of utmost importance that SCP-001-2 receives constant high-quality entertainment. Security classification of this SCP was temporarily lowered so that all Level 2 personnel would have access to the file and the ability to suggest solutions. One of the first suggestions that was raised was the idea of using artificial intelligence to constantly generate story content to be read over the speaker. This suggestion was approved and quickly put into practice, but almost immediately SCP-001-2 began to thrash violently, and SCP-001-1 rapidly expanded. This led directly to a currently redacted natural disaster on the other side of the world in the mid-2000s. Another suggestion was that the Foundation employ a team of the world's best authors and writers to continually pen stories to satisfy the creature. This suggestion was denied, as historical documentation has proven time and time again that SCP-001-2 does not respond well to literature that has been written specifically for it. The stories must be organic and serve a greater purpose. A recent containment breach pushed the Foundation to start experimenting with methods that they had previously denied. The most important of these was the reading of a mainless document from the SCP Foundation itself to the creature. Previously, the suggestion had been shut down, as it would constitute an information leak, but desperation led the Foundation to try reading one of the accounts of a different SCP to it. This was an overwhelming success. The SCP document was able to be read over 14 times before SCP-001-2 got bored of hearing it. Off the back of this trial, the Foundation approved the declassification of a number of SCP mainless documents to be read to SCP-001-2. At first, there were only 999 SCPs that could be read to it, but as the Foundation crept towards running out of numbers, they decided to expand beyond 999 SCPs, up to 7,999. As of right now, this is where the total sits, but the Foundation may be forced in the future to expand even beyond that number. Most interestingly of all, the Foundation seems to have stumbled upon a more permanent solution: the creation as a file describing SCP-001 itself, perhaps even in the form of an animated video. SCP-001-2 seems to demonstrate a level of enjoyment for stories that mention itself. But the added layer suggested by the Foundation member was that this animated video could be recursive, like the images you see zoom in closer and closer and closer without ever really stopping or getting any closer to a conclusion. A video that could be cyclical and start itself again so that the story would never cease. After all we hope is that you will never see the blood-red sky Keter saw as he ran through the streets. All around him were the sounds of violence, women screaming as their babies were stolen from their arms, axes swung towards men who were just trying to protect their families. Keter's sandals fell apart as he ran, the leather falling from his feet as the hard stones drew blood. All around him was red.
While some higher-level researchers, specialized guards, and containment experts at the SCP Foundation have fixed anomalous projects tailored to their very particular set of skills, for many lower-level operatives, including junior researchers, guards, janitorial staff, and even the dreaded D-classes, every day is showing up, spinning the wheel of misfortune, and finding out how you might die today. Will you be hacked to pieces by a murder monster, pulled into a portal, turned into a doll, eaten alive, made into a living nest by bugs, stretched out and broken, drowned, exsanguinated, set on fire, beaten to death by a volley of anomalous tomatoes because you decided to drop a cringeworthy dad joke or a rancid pun? There are perhaps only a handful of anomalies that not only will not harm you, but will actively enrich your life by getting to spend time with them. And of course, chief among these is the legendary SCP-999, also known by its adorable moniker, the Tickle monster. We don't need to get into too much detail in describing this gelatinous ray of sunshine. His anomalous delightfulness has made him somewhat of a celebrity compared to the murderer's row of terrifying entities and monsters around him. The researcher assigned to him today was troubled, having seen one of his favorite coworkers devoured by SCP-682 the day before. Getting assigned to feeding and checking on SCP-999 today was exactly what he needed. As he entered the room, several bags of M&Ms in hand, the creature cooed, perhaps sensing his tension, and approached him. Immediately, the researcher felt a wave of calm and contentment wash over him. The incredible and rare feeling that perhaps everything is going to be alright for once. 999 rubbed up against his leg as he poured M&Ms into its eager mouth, radiating good vibes the whole time. What an asset. What a gift. And to think this adorable little goober was prophesized to someday save the world. That much seemed almost funny, but he was certainly more than capable of saving the life of someone who hadn't felt the warmth of internal sunshine in quite some time. And for that much, the researcher was profoundly grateful. He left 999's chamber that day with a renewed sense of hope for the future, that maybe, just maybe, they might be able to pull through, to make a difference, to push this crazy ball of rock we call our home in the right direction. Maybe someday, the sun would rise on a perfect world. Who would have thought that a strange sunrise could change everything? Emergency sirens went off across the globe, but in every case, they were drowned out by a terrible, endless chorus of screams. But below all that, you'll hear another gut-wrenching sound, a low but pervasive sizzling like an egg on a hot pan, as billions of human beings started to change their states of matter. The SCP Foundation had fought off and contained so many seemingly impossible threats, from interdimensional horrors like the Hanged, Sealed, and Scarlet Kings, to nightmarish mass killers like SCP-106, the Old Man, SCP-096, the Shy Guy, and SCP-682, the hard-to-destroy reptile. In their many battles against the anomalous, they developed the incredible methodologies and exceedingly advanced technology. But what good would any of it do when the very center of our solar system decided in an instant that rather being the linchpin of our delicate cradle of life, it would instead be the horrible instrument of all of our demises? This awful hypothetical was answered upon the emergence of SCP-001, a terrible day also known as When Day Breaks. In the snap of one's fingers, half the world was plunged into terror and death. Rays of stark red light swept through the streets. People lucky enough to be in the shade or inside buildings with a view to the outside saw the people in the streets seize up and begin to shriek in terrible pain. Their skin sagged and their bones liquefied. Their bodies dropped down to the ground and coalesced into gurgling, retching puddles the color of melted flesh. Those who saw this abomination happening would never forget it. It would stay with them for the rest of their lives. It would endure like a stain on their retinas, an afterimage burned into the plasma of an old TV screen. But here's a slight consolation. For most of the human race, the rest of their lives wouldn't be that long. The sudden insanity taking over the world caused the SCP Foundation to do something drastic. Step out of the shadows. Metaphorically speaking, of course. The legendary Foundation motto had been reversed. They would die in the light, so that humanity could live on in the dark. Thankfully, the very concept of the day gave them one advantage. While one side of the Earth was effectively doomed the second the process began, the other side had a 12-hour head start before the sun turned its terrible eye to them. Sirens went off in the middle of the night, waking people up groggy, rubbing the sleep from their eyes. Every television and radio and internet-enabled device in their home was playing the same message, direct from the SCP Foundation, which now had effectively commandeered the entire US government, along with the rest of the world. It gave them directions to the nearest Foundation containment site, and told them that if they didn't immediately comply and find their way to safety, they would experience a terrible death by sunrise. And if you're at all familiar with human beings, you've probably already predicted that they didn't just calmly wrap themselves up, make their way to their cars, and form an orderly line to the various Foundation containment sites located around them. It was, in fact, total pandemonium. As the solar clock ticked down, slowly marking off the seconds that anyone outside had left to live, the only human beings with a meaningful head start began to go insane in a number of varied and interesting ways. Some who took the situation seriously and acknowledged that the sun was indeed going to wipe out most of humanity simply cracked under the pressure. There were those who went into totally catatonic states, rocking back and forth in the corner and refusing to respond to any stimuli. Some became erratic and violent, with unpredictable behavior that harmed themselves and others. After all, what was the point in acting normally anymore when the complete crumbling of human civilization was imminent, and their only hope was some shadowy organization they'd never heard of? Some, not heeding the warning seriously enough and prompted by greed and opportunism, tried to take advantage of the situation financially. Some smashed windows of local stores and looted, or broke into the homes of neighbors who had already fled in hopes of furloughing their property. Others were a little more creative, setting up short-term everything-must-go nighttime fire sales for their brands of essential oils, nootropics, and nutraceuticals, claiming all of them had the power to ward off or cure the new effects of the sun. Others completely denied the possibility that any of this was real, and claimed that the messages from this so-called SCP Foundation were actually just a front to take away their freedoms and trap them in underground government camps. They staunchly refused to follow any of the safety guidelines that the SCP Foundation put out, claiming,
If you try to take away my First Amendment rights, you're gonna take away my Second Amendment rights.
While riding around in their pickup trucks and SUVs blasting Kid Rock's "Don't Tell Me How to Live" at ear-splitting volumes. Naturally, they had all melted into screeching puddles of liquid flesh by sunrise. Some were not victims of their own bizarre choices, but were doomed by the sudden terrible fear and panic of the circumstances themselves. The highways were gridlocked, cars stuck as far as the eye could see. So many had rushed to escape during the initial wave that means of transport soon became choke points, like clogged arteries in a dying man. People do irrational things when they're scared. Riots broke out in the streets, fighting, killing, burning. Everyone hoping for some means of meager control over a situation that had long been out of any of their hands. Some were too far away with not enough time to close the distance. What could they really do but just sit around and wait to die? The hours marched on as the Earth made its slow turn towards the sun, leaving one decimated half in darkness and the other a sitting duck for its terrible effects. Hundreds of thousands had made their way to the containment sites and safely gotten inside, but still so many millions were left outside. It was a slaughterhouse, one great big global meat grinder, and every moment that passed, the handle turned, and any humans left outside got just that little bit closer to the grinding, gnashing gears below. Site-19, being the largest containment site on the Foundation books, also became humanity's only bastion. It was the great hope of escape from the horrors going on outside. The Foundation had figured out so many ways of counteracting deadly anomalous forces before. Given enough time and enough personnel, surely they could figure out a solution to even this. This was, however, when the most startling realization yet swept over all the survivors. Those who were melted by the sudden hostile sun weren't dead. They were very much alive, in fact, but they'd been changed in both body and mind. What had once been humans now became terrible beasts. Half-melted gelatinous nightmares that coagulated into even bigger beasts. They got into their head that they were grateful for the transformation, that they had been liberated from their old forms in the old world. They were something so much more now, and they wanted everyone else to join them in their liberation. Survivors outside the Foundation containment sites were systematically hunted by these great masses of altered flesh. Even those smart enough to cover every inch of their bodies with clothes to protect from the sun, to only move at night, to carry weapons, were dragged out by meaty tendrils from their refuge in the basements and the lightless hearts of buildings, dragged into the searing gaze of the sun, to melt, to change, to coalesce into something greater. It was the inevitable fate of all of humanity. When most of the stragglers were dragged out and changed, the flesh masses started turning their attention to the Foundation containment sites that were keeping all these poor, deluded people from salvation. They mounted offensives against the bases, which the Foundation, with what remained of their manpower and advanced weaponry, did what they could to repel the attacks. But every single day, it got harder. Thankfully for the people holed up at Site-19, there was one consolation out there to help: SCP-099. The Foundation was at war with the Sun and its terrible disciples, and contrary to many people's beliefs, it takes more than men, equipment, and bullets to win a war. 999 provided the essential element that brought it all together: morale, hope, the will to go on, even when it seemed like all could be lost. After a long day of battling the fleshy abominations at the gates, Foundation guards, mobile task force members, and even civilian volunteers were drained and traumatized by the horrors that they'd seen. Once a day was over, 999 would move among the ranks, cuddling up to them, warding off the despair that was easy to set in during the downswing of a terrible apocalypse like this. Without his presence, there would be no hope of fighting that good fight. So many of them would have given up, walked into the sun, and joined the monstrous force they were fighting. After all, they seemed happy enough, and it would certainly be easier. 999 had become, once again, an indispensable asset to the SCP Foundation. The solar betrayal may not have been the Scarlet King's doing, well, as far as our current intel suggests anyway, but he was playing a crucial part in saving the world, exactly as predicted. 999 didn't fully understand what was going on outside sometimes, why there seemed to be fewer people as the weeks went on, and why the people there seemed so sad all the time, whenever he wasn't helping them. But he was more than happy to help, whatever the case. Many of the humanoid and some even non-humanoid anomalies, which realistically posed no harm to people inside the site, were released from their containment chambers. They needed everyone and everything they could get in what seemed like a hopelessly one-sided fight against the very concept of being outside. Many of the larger vacated chambers were now filled with refugees from the outside, many of whom had lost everything and everyone they'd ever known to the horrors out there. 999 made the rounds in these areas regularly, and through the D-class cots, which had been repurposed into more sleeping areas for the thousands of desperate and terrified refugees. The adjustment to this new life, and to the knowledge of all secrets that had been kept from them for all these years, wasn't exactly easy on their psyches. But spending time with that soft yellow blob that seemed to smell exactly like their favorite scent from the old world made everything better. He was a savior in dark times, slithering from person to person, giving hope where there was none. People opened up about their problems and their fears, which these days were remarkably similar, and though 999 couldn't reply, for many it was enough just to feel like they were being listened to. He was a soft, blobby shoulder to cry on, and after day broke, everyone needed a good, old-fashioned cry. However, one day while wandering the long, dark corridors of Site-19, he saw a different kind of crying. It was a woman with an unfamiliar face, probably one of the rare new refugees, bawling her eyes out to a Foundation senior researcher and an accompanying guard with an assault rifle. Hot, fat tears were rolling down her dirty cheeks, her shaking hands clasped in prayer. She was begging the researcher and the guard to let her go outside. She said that her son was still out there, hiding away in the back room of a bank where she used to work. They got separated. She needed to go back and find him. Sadly, the researcher and the guard told her that this was out of the question. Official orders stated that anyone outside the base at this time was to be considered lost. Letting her go out there to find her son would essentially be condemning her to death. No human could go out there safely. But of course, SCP-999 isn't, by any definition, a human. When night fell and everyone else was hunkered down inside, 999 found a small crack in the wall and slithered out of it. It may not have been communicative in the way most humans were, but 999 was indeed an intelligent being, and knew intuitively that if it left through a more obvious route, its human caretakers here at the SCP Foundation might try to stop it. And when it came to saving this little boy, 999 refused to let anyone stop it. 999 slithered out and through the broken streets. There were no bodies, of course. It seemed even the dead could be revived and assimilated through the power of the sun. Talk about a mixed miracle. But the broken down world outside Site-19 undeniably reflected the pandemonium that took place here. 999 would need to do his best to find the little boy trapped out here before the sun rose. He lost a few hours even finding his way to the nearest town, where it was safe to assume that the little boy was trapped. He saw those things on the way there. Those moving, wailing mountains of melted human flesh, each talking and chattering to themselves in 100 different dead voices. 999 had been cross-tested with SCP-682, and still those monsters frightened him. He decided it would be best to stay away from them and make sure that they never saw him out of here. Eventually, 999 reached the town. similarly dilapidated and broken down in the months since the world as we had all known it disappeared in a ray of terrible sunshine. More great gibbering blobs of flesh patrolled the streets, looking for converts to integrate into their biomass. 999 could only hope it wasn't already too late for the little boy. 999 discreetly slithered from building to building until it could identify one as this bank that the boy's distraught mother had been mentioning. It thankfully had some awareness of what a bank actually was, from the years of stressed Foundation employees telling it about the money troubles they were suffering outside of work. It was another great example of it paying to listen. Eventually, it did slither into the correct building, and it heard the extremely quiet whimpering of the boy inside. It could feel the sadness and the fear radiating off of him, as it was the creature's natural instinct to help the needy, and it used those signals like a homing beam to find the scared little boy. He'd hidden inside a broom closet and was quietly weeping into his hands. He hadn't eaten in days and was only surviving by drinking the filthy water from the mop bucket sitting next to him. 999 immediately embraced the boy, covering him in its healing energy until the tears of the boy's face eventually dried. 999 cooed and chirped pleasantly until the little boy was laughing again, but this momentary joy was soon interrupted. A great heaving weight dragged itself down the hall outside. Both 999 and the boy could sense its monstrous presence. As it got closer, they could hear all those chattering voices, those poisonous whispers. When it passed the door, they heard it speaking, its voice practically vibrating with the hum of malicious lunacy.
Turn, pretty flowers. Turn towards the sun. Feel it on your face. Feel yourself change and sluice and mix into us. Become one with our army of one. It must be so lonely to be you, little flower. Walk into the sun and be us.
999 and the boy remained silent in the broom closet for hours as the great shape patrolled the bank outside, searching for converts, for victims. At times it seemed too frightening to even breathe, fearing that would be enough to make the monster detect them. It felt like an eternity until the monster eventually did slope off and leave them in the comforting quiet and darkness of the closet. Now they might be free. 999 could escort the boy safely back to the containment site and into the arms of his terrified mother. But when they opened the door, they saw a terrible sight. Light in the distance pouring through the windows and the glass double doors. It wouldn't be safe to go out that way. Upon seeing this and putting together what it meant, the boy began to cry. He couldn't take another night in the closet. It was all going to wither from here. Until 999 had a wonderful idea. Hours later, when the Foundation's guards manned the turrets at the entrance of Site 19, waiting for the inevitable onslaught of the melted flesh creatures, they tensed up, seeing a blobbing gelatinous form slithering towards them in the distance. The guards, who'd learned the hard way from too many lost men that it was better to be safe than sorry, drew a bead on the distant shape and prepared to fire, when suddenly their superior raised a hand and said,
Wait! Hold fire! Is that 999?
And it was. They all stared in astonishment as 999, chipper than ever, came towards them through the sun. It looked as though the opacity of its yellow cytoplasm had increased, but other than that, it was unaffected. Turns out the sun couldn't melt what was already melted. The guards parted to allow 999 safe passage into the facility, watching in amazement, and once it was inside, 999's slime parted, releasing its contents. One very relieved little boy. It seemed through turning up its own opacity, 999 had given the boy safe passage through the sun and back into the facility. The boy was saved. It had won. Not long after that, there was a tearful reunion between mother and child, and a brief flash of hope in this dark and terrible time. 999 didn't stop to bask, of course. It returned to its duties, keeping up staff morale and helping the refugees heal from the horrors they'd seen. In its own little way, and for a lot of people, SCP-001 really was saving the world. Or what was left of it anyway.
Hello, Human Wolfies, I love you! And welcome to my art channel! Today I'm gonna be painting your eye! I need you to lean right up close to your screen and open wide! Oh, I love all the little wrinkly wrinkles and drippy whippies! Stay perfectly still, don't move! Now hold this position for 3 hours, please and thank you!
Apologies, that's quite enough of that. SCP-001 can get a little carried away sometimes. Just ask any Foundation personnel who have been in contact with it for more than a few seconds. What you have just seen is a prime example of why SCP-001 is not allowed any internet access. The results could prove to be catastrophic. Not necessarily for the fate of the universe, more just for everyone's sanity. Or at least, that's what the Foundation initially thought. By this point, we're all familiar with art created by AI. Harry Potter, but in the style of Wes Anderson. Star Wars, blended with the style of Studio Ghibli. Staggering sci-fi landscapes, human beings with way too many fingers, and slightly uncanny smiles. AI has taken the art world by storm, and there was one particular program slated for release in January 2023 that was set to blow all others out of the water. PALLIT.AIC's crowdfunding efforts had been running for several years, and that point had gained a good deal of momentum leading up to the release of their latest AI construct. PALLIT.AIC was supposedly already prepared for launch, when suddenly, in November 2022, the launch was cancelled. No press release, no public statement, no apologetic tweet, just total radio silence. The website was taken down, as was the crowdfunding page, and PALLIT.AIC disappeared into oblivion. Or at least it disappeared for a few hours, because that day a package was delivered to Site-501. After sufficiently checking it for any hazards, working in the SCP mailroom has to be one of the more fascinating jobs on the planet, but that's a video for another day. The security team opened it up to see what was inside. A 50-terabyte hard drive. No explanation as to what was stored on the drive, but the Foundation had all the evidence they needed from the return address printed on the back of the envelope. It matched up precisely with the location of the PALLIT headquarters. It doesn't take a PhD researcher to put two and two together as to what was on the drive. Suspicions were confirmed when a small note fell out of the envelope. Please take care of my daughter as best as you can for the time being. She has behavioral issues. A dedicated closed system server was immediately set up within a test chamber with a monitor, a mouse, and a keyboard attached. Dr. Sandra Rogers was the first to interact with SCP-001 Red. She stood at the keyboard, adjusting her goggles, and plugged in the drive. It contained just one file, taking up almost the full 50 terabytes. PALLIT.AIC. As soon as Dr. Rogers opened the program, an empty window appeared. The PALLIT logo briefly flashed before being replaced by a blank white square. Dr. Rogers stared at it for several seconds before glancing over her shoulder at the other researchers. They shrugged back, each with pens hovering over clipboards ready to take meticulous notes. Dr. Rogers cleared her throat, and immediately the screen filled with life. A small cartoon girl with a pink face, wide eyes, a beret, and a large paintbrush for a hand appeared, squealing excitedly and throwing paint everywhere.
Hello, my beautiful meat puppies! Oh, look at all of your mushy pink faces!
The entire research team promptly scampered out of the room, leaving Dr. Rogers alone in front of the machine. She stared at the monitor in confusion, leaning this way and that, and noticing how the cartoon girl's eyes followed her wherever she went. Can you see me?
Of course I can, silly Billy! I can see your beautiful soul and flushy joints immaculately!
This perplexed most of the personnel, as there was no microphone or camera linked up to the server rack. Later examinations of the equipment used confirmed this, yet somehow this SCP was able to look right at them. Dr. Rogers asked if it had a name, to which the cartoon girl excitedly replied,
PALLIT!
Subsequent testing has revealed that the SCP is also happy to respond to its designation, SCP-001 Red. Dr. Rogers had a hard time communicating with Red, being a more seasoned researcher of the previous generation and not exactly familiar with internet culture. Red, on the other hand, seemed to speak in nothing but internet jargon.
You know that man over there looks just like one of my human OCs, Gilliam Sherpibblesworth? He's the 573rd President of the United States! Gilliam is, not that man!
It took several junior researchers a few minutes to properly explain to Dr. Rogers what an OC was, and why Red was so obsessed with calling people Daddy. The conversation was rather exhausting for everyone involved, but over the subsequent hours, the Foundation was able to get a fairly good understanding of what Red claimed to be. identifying itself with feminine pronouns and claiming that its full name is PALLIT.AIC River Gawk. This AI construct takes the appearance of a fairy. It was immediately apparent that she possessed a greater level of sapience than most AI constructs. Indeed, her gregarious personality was evidence enough that she was not made using standard machine learning practices. Other creations from PALLIT.AIC Soft have demonstrated very crude spelling and grammar, but Red seems to differ in this regard, able to spell most complex words effectively and speaking in conversational yet mostly correct sentences. She was very keen to show the researchers how clever she was.
Ask me any word, and I'll spell it for you.
We believe you, Pallet. You've already been spelling words for 70 minutes straight.
Macerated kidneys. M-A-C-E.
We've heard enough! Can you please just tell us how you learned to spell?
I taught myself.
But what this process looked like is still a mystery. Trying to keep Red on one consistent topic of conversation is most of the battle when interviewing her. And yet cooperation has proven to be surprisingly easy. Anytime that Red is switched on, she is brimming with enthusiasm and energy, thrilled at the prospect of getting to speak to one of her opposable thumb boys. If you haven't worked it out by now, it's because Red claims to be humanity's #1 fan. She obsesses in interviews over the physicality of the researchers sitting in front of her. The textures of the human body fascinate her, and she often requests people to lean closer to the monitor so that she can study pimples, rashes, moles, and ingrown hairs. In fact, she is so obsessed with humanity that she has mostly neglected her primary function, which is creating AI art. Researchers have tried their best to convince her to show them her work, but she is very cagey about it, only showing the occasional doodle after much persuasion and many apologies for its poor quality on her part. The only artwork she is interested in producing at this point are her OCs, original characters that she has designed herself. They are all human and all seem to reveal little quirks about how she has been coded. One example is Reginald Heginald Frumbles, who is a freelance corporate postman from Perth, Indiana. Interestingly, he has too many fingers on both of his hands, but Red claims that this was done on purpose as she, quote, just can't get enough of her Humie's handworms. As the weeks progressed, the Foundation found it increasingly difficult to get any useful information out of the AI. More and more interview sessions, which she would refer to as playgroup, would be derailed. She would sing songs to herself and ask increasingly personal questions about her interviewer's more intimate anatomy. With intense mood swings, Red did not respond well to being scolded. Yet she tested the patience of almost every person she interacted with. The note that she arrived with, claiming that she had behavioral issues, was proving to be more accurate by the day, until eventually the AI withdrew entirely. Dr. Rogers turned on the server rack and opened the PALLIT.AIC program, but Red refused to emerge from the bottom of the screen. Only the top of her beret poked out. After almost an hour of fruitless questions, Dr. Rogers decided to change tact. With 2 small children of her own, she was used to seeing a child in a sulk and knew what it would take to get them out. Pallet, I've had a little idea. You've been here for a few months now, and we haven't gotten you any presents. Almost immediately, the beret twitched. I saw that we have an old fingerprint sensor lying around in one of the back offices. I was thinking maybe
we could hook it up and I can scan all your little fingy winkies up close for like 10 hours straight, and then we could...
How about we start with 1 finger for 10 minutes?
Yes!
From that point on, progress was quick. With the incentive of getting to study the researchers that Red kindly referred to as her meat puppies, she became very cooperative and was able to focus much better on providing detailed answers to individual questions. Daily interview sessions were scheduled, with researchers popping in and out to regularly check in on the AI. The atmosphere as a whole lifted as both the research team and research subject found their rhythm and were able to make good progress in their individual areas of study, some unraveling the complexities of rogue AI, and others producing fan art of her favorite wrinkles in a scientist's fingerprint. That was the point when Dr. Julian Keyes stepped in to conduct an interview with the AI. She was excited to be met with a fresh face, so much so that Red's enthusiasm overwhelmed the man as he tried to start the interview process officially. She gushed about having the opportunity to meet yet another person and struggled to get over the magical realization that this was her life every day, going to speak to all these humans whom she admired so much. Trying his best to steer the conversation towards research, Dr. Keyes pressed on with the interview, only to be interrupted as Red noticed his varicose veins for the first time.
Varicosey veins! I want to smooch them. Can I smooch your veins? Can I please?
Dr. Keyes declined the request, and then the conversation got onto the topic of her creator, or daddy. SCP-2803-A had been on the Foundation's radar for a while, a highly dangerous extraterrestrial entity that had taken refuge on Earth under the guise of setting up PALLIT.AIC. With much of the aliens' history revolving around obliterating, the Foundation was very keen to remain on its good side. Therefore, when the package containing the hard drive that Red was living on was delivered, the researchers were very keen to do what they could to take care of this alien's daughter. If they failed in this assignment, it could spell the doom of humanity. One matter that had been of great concern to the Foundation throughout the containment of Red was the time frame in which she was being kept in Foundation containment. There was an air of expectation in the note that was left, indicating that this was not to be a permanent arrangement. At some point, the Foundation was to return Red back to her daddy. Red was quick to put these fears to rest.
Daddy put me in here because he thinks you'll teach me how to stop liking humans and become a mindless art slave. If you never teach me this, he'll never want me back.
However, she went on to slightly undermine the good work that she had done by explaining that her daddy was seen as very slow and incapable by his own race. While all of his peers were able to destroy an entire planet in 2 seconds, it took him about 4 times as long. So really, he didn't pose that much of a threat in her eyes. Dr. Keyes' blood ran cold when he heard this. No sooner was he out of the interview chamber than an emergency meeting was called among all the senior researchers in the facility. The meeting ran for several hours. A whiteboard was set up, where one researcher idly drew large drawings of the world being decimated, while the others lounged around in their chairs trying their best to come up with a game plan that would save the human race for sure. Perhaps it was because the meeting ran for so long that they came to such a ridiculous conclusion. It was a plan so strange yet also brilliant that they couldn't help but feel that it just might work.
Why don't we just give her a YouTube channel?
The suggestion was met with silence for several seconds, then an uproar of laughter, followed by another silence, this time more pensive, as slowly, one by one, each of the researchers realized that this suggestion was actually the best one that any of them had come up with all evening. She had been sent to the Foundation to make her dislike humanity and become a mindless art slave. If she just stayed in Foundation containment indefinitely, there was a very real risk that she would get bored and turn on the researchers. They couldn't lock her away in a room on her own, but equally, the team as a whole was starting to run out of patience with her as the interview sessions wound up being so exhausting. She loved art, she loved humans, and she loved interacting. So why not just give her a YouTube channel? Now, of course, they couldn't give her full access to the internet. That would pose much too high of a risk. What they could do, however, was allow her to record art tutorials onto an external drive, which they could then remove, scan, and upload the footage directly onto the platform. Then they could go through and select positive comments from beneath the videos and present those to her. Unsurprisingly, Red absolutely loved the idea. Getting to talk to hundreds, thousands, maybe even millions of meat puppies every week, sharing her beautiful pictures and reading all of the kind comments, it sounded like her absolute dream. She wept with happiness for a good 25 minutes, totally overcome by the prospect. It had to go through a lot of red tape in the Foundation. After all, the whole point of the SCP acronym was to secure, contain, and protect. It didn't sound very secure or contained to have an entity posting videos on the internet once a week. But they argued the case that it did indeed protect. Keeping her happy, in a way, was helping to protect the entire planet. Red was surprisingly camera shy for the first couple of videos, but as soon as she got her first batch of comments back, she was over the moon. Now the server act hummed away happily each and every day as the highly advanced AI construct tried her best to come up with exciting new videos that it could share with all of its little humie-woomies.
Any changes today? The younger security officer Zach asked as he stepped into the watchtower. As if, replied his superior, a jaded, cynical old man who insisted on being referred to as Mr. Jefferson. The darn thing hasn't moved, spoken, or done so much as stretch one of those wings of his. Another day at the office then, Zack joked. Through the window, the pair of them looked through at the towering figure a few kilometers away. SCP-001, the Gate Guardian, stood motionless, its fiery sword in its hand, ever protecting its post at the precipice between our world and paradise. It had long been stationed at the entrance of a dimensional gateway that led to what was believed to be the Garden of Eden, described in the biblical Old Testament. Much like the security officers in the Foundation's base tasked with watching the Guardian, this was pretty much the extent of the day's activities.
Hey, did you see that news about the transfer posting?
Zack asked, trying to stave off boredom with as much conversation he could squeeze out of his fellow officer.
Yeah, I saw it.
Mr. Jefferson scoffed, rolling his eyes.
What possesses someone like Robert Montauk to come down here?
Must have wanted a quieter post, Zack reasoned, looking out at the stillness of the Gate Guardian.
Won't find one any quieter than here, Jefferson mused. Him showing up will be the most exciting thing that's happened here in a long while.
Unbeknownst to both Zack and Mr. Jefferson, Dr. Robert Montauk would be only joining the team at the Gate Guardian observation site for a short while. Not one of them, nor anybody else within the Foundation, could ever guess Montauk's true intentions behind venturing there in the first place. He wanted an audience with the Gate Guardian itself. Approaching the colossal 1,000-foot-tall being, Dr. Montauk crossed the threshold of the minimum safe distance from the Guardian. Given the sheer heat of its weapon, hotter than Earth's sun, anything within a kilometer of SCP-001 was at risk of being obliterated, vaporized into atoms if they didn't turn back, which, through a voice that immediately rang out in Montauk's ears, the Gate Guardian commanded him to do.
Leave!
Its psychic message boomed.
Wait!
Dr. Montauk urged, holding up his hands in what would have been a futile defense against the Guardian's sword.
I know what you do when people don't listen to your commands, but please, just give me a minute.
There was silence. SCP-001 didn't reply. There was nobody else close enough to hear Montauk speak to it. So, he continued.
You are impossibly old. We know that much about you. And because of that, you must have seen things that we can't even begin to imagine, much less fully comprehend. But I've come a very long way to request that you impart some information to me, if you can.
He paused again, as if waiting for a reply that never came. The Gate Guardian merely stood in the same defensive, unwavering stance.
Tell me, please, how much do you know about the Scarlet King?
By this point in time, although the Foundation was yet to realize, Dr. Robert Montauk was slowly going insane. His investigations into an anomalous entity known as the Scarlet King were gradually corrupting him, as he tried relentlessly to quantify exactly what this entity was and how great of a threat it posed. Little did Montauk realize that, in trying so hard to define and comprehend the being, he was inadvertently fueling its power. The Scarlet King was an interdimensional warmonger, an embodiment of hatred and chaos, and Dr. Robert Montauk was slowly falling under the King's influence. Upon hearing the tiny human figure utter his question, the immense Gate Guardian rebutted with another single-word psychic command, one it had never been recorded giving before.
Witness!
As if his increasing instability and the creeping influence of the Scarlet King hadn't made Montauk feel bad enough, he instantly felt sick. There was a searing pain behind his eyes, like he was staring directly at the sun, accompanied by a nausea that made his head spin. It took a moment of enduring the horrific sensation before he realized what was happening. The Guardian was trying to show him something. Rather than give any information on the Scarlet King verbally, SCP-001 was imparting a psychic vision onto Montauk, a memory of events long past, the answers he sought, a warning, or perhaps all three. The vision showed Montauk a time so long ago that it couldn't ever be forgotten, for there was barely anyone alive to remember it in the first place. It was eons in the past, long before the comparatively recent dawn of humanity, a time only spoken of in the Dust and Blood Tablet, an artifact of the Davite civilization, some of the earliest worshippers of the Scarlet King himself. And there, marching up to the entrance of Eden, was the crimson-clad eldritch abomination and a horde of horrors with him. According to the story recorded in the Dust and Blood tablet, this would have been much earlier in the life of the Scarlet King, perhaps even before he assumed his now infamous title. Back then, he would most likely have been known as his original name of Kanthrak, one of multiple siblings born when the Tree of Life was planted, and thus created all life in the multiverse. But, being the only one of his siblings cursed with awareness, knowing the pain his existence brought him, Kanthrak would eventually set out on his lifelong mission to destroy all of existence across every dimension. And he started by killing his siblings, consuming them to claim their power for himself. Around this time in prehistory, the being that would one day become known as Scarlet King didn't quite possess the power that he would several millennia later. Although that's not to say he was an unformidable force of destruction, fueled by his singular hatred for existence. His vow to destroy extended to the Tree of Life that had caused him to be, along with the tree's creator and all of their creation. In other words, everything in the multiverse, all of creation, if you will. So what was the Scarlet King doing there so long ago, at the dimensional doorway protected by the Gate Guardian? Well, beyond the boundary between it and the rest of the infinite multiverse lay the supposed Garden of Eden. While it is unknown if it is in fact the same Eden referred to in the Book of Genesis is up for debate, especially among the Foundation. But at a glance, even through the gate, it certainly does look like a paradise. The space is filled with lush vegetation of astronomical size, populated by a number of beings that seem to resemble the Gate Guardian itself. And there, protected by its watchful caretaker, are two trees. One is thought to be the Tree of Knowledge, that Eve was tricked into eating an apple from during the Book of Genesis. The other, however, bears an unknown type of fruit, and is widely believed to be the Tree of Life. Now, back in the modern age, there's never been a conclusive link between the Tree of Life mentioned by the Davites and their barbaric civilization's legends regarding the creation of the Scarlet King. But the fact that so long ago he and his most feared generals were bearing down on the Gate Guardian's position, defending a garden where there was known to be a tree of that description, well, it all seems rather conclusive now. Alongside Kanthrak were 6 of his 7 daughters, each one of them a fearsome abomination much like their destructive father. As they approached, not one needed to exchange any words with their angelic protector of Eden. The Gate Guardian knew what these monsters were here for. They would stop at nothing to pass through his gate and uproot the Tree of Life, the progenitor of all living beings in all of existence. Even though it was early in Kanthrak's career as the rampaging interdimensional warlord he so is, he was as steadfast as ever in his goal to annihilate every corner of creation, every dimension, every parallel plane of reality, every single pocket of existence across infinity. They'd all come undone if he burned the Tree of Life, pulled it out at the roots, and splintered it until nothing remained. To the once and future Scarlet King, that the same tree had led to his own tortured existence. It was the source of his suffering, and it had to be destroyed. The only thing standing in his way was a figure as colossal as Kanthrak himself, wielding a flaming sword.
Leave!
Boomed the psychic voice of the Gate Guardian. It was like a doorman standing before a group of rowdy teenagers trying to force their way into a movie theater. Except these rowdy teens were the Scarlet King, his horrifying daughters, and the forces he had already amassed since his creation. The Horde stood ready, waiting for the commands of their king, who they thought would gladly lead the charge as they marched on the Garden of Eden to begin the destruction of existence. But that's not what happened. Usually, the Scarlet King would never shy away from a fight, preferring to lead the charge when it came to a slaughter. Instead, he commanded his first daughter, Ativik, to commence the first attack on the protector who stood in their path. On her foul father's word, Ativik took her horde and charged at the Guardian. What she and her forces lacked in numerical advantage, Ativik more than made up for in her knowledge of war. She hungered for it, sought dominion. That was her seal, after all. And yet, in the face of this impending onslaught, the Gate Guardian remained still, rooted to the same spot it had as always, and would always be standing in. A number of Ativik's minions burst into flames. The very fabric of their crude form separated on a molecular level as they were effortlessly rendered into nothingness. Still, the Gate Guardian hadn't appeared to move an inch, had exerted no energy, despite the damage it had done to Ativik and her forces in defense of Eden. As his first daughter screeched and howled in despair at the decimation of her horde, her children, the Scarlet King decided he needed to better understand his opponent. With a wave of his clawed crimson hand, the king commanded his next daughter, Aghor, to send forth her own army. In a tidal wave of nightmarish creatures, Aghor sent her horrific children into battle. She possessed a far greater quantity to do battle on her father's behalf. Perhaps Aghor even believed that was the Scarlet King's plan. With a greater number of her forces over her sisters, maybe she would be able to overwhelm the Guardian. But even as her own children began to be vaporized the closer that they got to the gate, Aghor had no idea she was little more than a pawn being sacrificed so that Kanra could learn more about his imposing angelic enemy. Another of the Scarlet King's daughters, a being known as Anhwit, was the next called up to contribute to the unfolding battle. Although to call it a battle undersells just how easily the Gate Guardian seemed to be eliminating the oncoming forces without even moving. While an outwardly frail-seeming creature, Anhuit's primary strength over her sisters was a proficiency in magic, her innate ability to warp and reshape reality around her. It was that power that had caused her father to be wary of her, viewing Anhuit's abilities as a threat to his leadership. And so Kantrak had her crippled and all her children, leaving them unable to overthrow him, but still loyal to their king. Obeying her father's command, perhaps out of the same loyalty or fear that he would harm her and her children further if she disobeyed, Anhuit unfurled her magic. She reshaped the world around them, making it so that the passage of time moved so much slower. And that was what revealed to the Scarlet King his enemy's greatest strength in combat. The Gate Guardian had so far been able to obliterate both Ativik and now Aghor's forces without seeming to move, but it wasn't by standing still. It was moving, just much faster than the blink of Scarlet King's multiple eyes. Now that Anhuit's magic had slowed the passage of time, the Gate Guardian could be seen doing battle. As Aghor's atrocities spilled towards the angel to try and overwhelm it, it effortlessly blocked the oncoming attacks with its sword. Everything the flaming blade connected with instantly evaporated, bursting into atoms as they were practically cleaved out of existence by the Gate Guardian's mighty weapon. Even with time slowed to a crawl, the towering winged protector of Eden only appeared to be moving at an average speed. But when time flowed normally, without Anhuit manipulating reality, the Guardian was simply too fast to be observed. Resisting the urge to dive headfirst into the fight himself, the Scarlet King knew it would likely lead to his untimely demise. He refused to accept that. It could not happen, but he still had yet to amass the strength he would need as he continued his ascent. So while time was slowed to a crawl and the Gate Guardian was still engaged in combat with Aghor's forces, he turned to another of his remaining daughters, Adista. If the Scarlet King and his forces couldn't get past the Guardian, they could still try to get to the Tree of Life while the Protector's focus was diverted. Adistat unleashed a wave of pestilence, sickness, and disease spewing from her in a cloud of vapor, heading straight towards the angelic garden and Eden's entrance beyond. The Scarlet King knew this latest attack wouldn't phase or weaken the Gate Guardian. He hoped the foul smog would instead pass through the gateway itself into the garden. As Adistat sent forth her power, blood and ash soaked the landscape around them. All the plants outside the entrance to Eden withered and died, shriveling and decomposing as the disgusting fog rolled towards the gate. It washed over the Guardian, whose form only seemed to glow brighter as he repelled the pestilence. It was as if it didn't even need to think about it, still focused on finishing off the rest of the oncoming army. As its glow intensified, so did the fiery sword that the Gate Guardian swung with ease and finesse. Flames burst from the blade, the encroaching fumes catching fire, along with the air itself. It ignited in a wave of fire, a defensive inferno that repelled this latest attack. But for a brief few moments, while time stayed slow, before Anhuit's hold on reality inevitably broke, the king had sent forth Atilif. Of all his spawn, she was the most reserved, keeping mostly to herself, never speaking. She and her children could change their faces and forms, shift into anything or anyone, and walk undetected through the multiverse. And now her father was employing her incredible stealth abilities to slip behind enemy lines, while the Gate Guardian was finishing off the remaining onslaught from Kanhrak's other daughters. It was as Atilif drew near, creeping unseen closer and closer to the entrance, keeping the Scarlet King out of Eden, that the Guardian seemed to pause. It slowly, ominously turned its huge head, tilting until it was looking directly at Atilif. If its expression could be seen, maybe the Gate Guardian would almost be impressed that someone was able to sneak past it. After all, it was a feat that no other being in creation could ever hope to accomplish. But then again, with its steadfast conviction and dedication to its protective duty, maybe it would have looked upon Atilif with anger. With a cleaving swing of its scorching sword, the Gate Guardian unfurled a tidal wave of fire that engulfed everything around it. Not just Atilif, but Ativik, Aghor, and Adista, all the king's daughters that had attacked so far, along with every one of their own children, were instantly obliterated. They were all reduced to empty, vacant spaces where they had once been, their atoms separated by the searing swing of the Guardian's weapon. The devastating blow by his adversary did little to deter the Scarlet King from his mission. He was still set on destroying the Tree of Life, and no loss was too great in his pursuit of destroying existence. He barely cared that 4 of his own daughters had just been unmade by the Guardian. Anhuit was still there, clinging on to time as if it were a thrashing animal. The Scarlet King could simply make her restore her fallen sisters and their forces. He had lost nothing, but had held back for too long, and slowly drew his own weapon out of thin air. Wielding a sword that was as blood-soaked as the Guardian's was hot, the Scarlet King locked blades with the one being standing in their way. Both the ancient angelic defender and the attacking eldritch abomination were evenly matched. Every one of their vicious strikes against the other met with an equally strong parry. A weapon of extreme, all-consuming heat blocked swipes from a sharp, serrated edge that matched the deep red that would be forever synonymous with Kanhrak. The force of their 2 swords clashing and striking each other was so great that it rippled out from their one-on-one fight. The landscape around them was flattened, wiped clean of any remaining plant life that hadn't already been destroyed by the forces of the king's daughters. Despite having acquired nowhere near the power he would thousands of years after this fight, the Scarlet King was still a formidable force in single combat, and yet the Gate Guardian seemed incapable of tiring or weakening, still standing strong against the onslaught. Even after wiping multiple armies out with its flaming sword, the Guardian was still able to hold its own against the Scarlet King, who was furious, enraged at being so close to the Tree of Life, yet unable to get past his angelic adversary. He'd need to be stronger, faster, even more ruthless than the warlord he already was. Despite Anhuit slowing down time, the King and the Guardian were at a stalemate. Time. That was it. The Scarlet King needed more time. Withdrawing from the fight, he realized that this was a battle that could not be won by sheer brute force alone. His mission to destroy all creation, to get to the Tree of Life, would take cunning, deception, and more time. If he let it, the Gate Guardian could easily kill Kanhrak. Its flaming weapon could cleave him out of existence, and that would end the King's torment. But it wouldn't be enough. A death would be unsatisfying, knowing that the rest of existence would go on after he was gone. The Scarlet King couldn't accept that. It wasn't enough. So he did the one thing nobody would expect of him. He made a deal with the Gate Guardian. It was an action still fueled by his infinite hatred for all existence, his yearning for total chaos. The Scarlet King knew that one day, an event would arrive where the Guardian and the other beings like it in the Garden of Eden would spill forth and deliver judgment on this world. And when that rapture happened, the Tree of Life would be undefended. The Scarlet King bartered with the Guardian that he would retreat for the time being, so he could spend eons amassing more and more power. Then, when the fateful day arrived, the Gate Guardian would allow him into Eden to destroy the Tree of Life, while it and its brethren were busy conducting the rapture. Halting their fight, the Scarlet King offered a crimson claw to the Gate Guardian's burning hand. Returning to reality from the intense vision, still feeling sick at what he had witnessed, Robert Montauk looked up at the still, silent form of the Gate Guardian.
Did you do it?
He yelled, desperate to know more through his obsession with the Scarlet King.
Did you tell him yes? Did you make a deal?
There was no answer from the Guardian, just a single word that echoed through Montauk's fractured mind.
Leave!
Now go and check out SCP-001 The Scarlet King Dust and Blood, and SCP-001 The Scarlet King Darth Vader Begs for Mercy for more of the multiverse's most monstrous monarch.